Chapter 1. A Meeting in Badrika Ashram. It was early morning. Nara and Narayan were seated on a throne in beautiful Badrika Ashram, the heavenly abode in the northern sky. Great sages, rishis, scholarly Brahmins, and the muktas, or the liberated ones, had gathered there in a meeting. The rishis were relating the stories of atrocities being committed by the asuras in Bharat Bhumi. Rishi Narayan was counseling them. All those present were listening to him with rapt attention. Their eyes and ears were fixed on him. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew in. With it, sage Durvasa appeared and stood behind the gathering. No one took any notice of him, and no one stood up to welcome him. Everyone's attention was concentrated on what was being said at the meeting. Nobody, therefore, turned or looked behind. Minutes and even hours passed. Still, no one moved from his seat. Thereupon, sage Durvasa got very angry. Blood shot up into his eyes. His voice was like thunder, and he uttered this curse: "You shall all have to take birth on the earth, and the asuras and the rakshasas shall harass you and inflict much suffering on you." On hearing this, Dharmadev and Bhakti Devi at once got up. They welcomed Durvasa, pleaded with him, prayed to him, and asked for his forgiveness. At this, Durvasa's anger died down. He relented. Then he began to speak. "My curse cannot be withdrawn, but, in order to save you from the consequences of the curse, the Lord will also take birth on the earth along with you all. He will destroy the demons and save you from misery." Saying this, sage Durvasa disappeared. After a while, Narayan meditated upon his Ishtadev, Purna Purushottam Narayan, the Lord Supreme, who blessed him and said, "Have no fear, my children. I too shall take birth on the earth along with you all. I shall free you from the clutches of the demons. Worship the Lord. I shall save
Chapter
you
2,
from your troubles."
Birth of Ghanshyam. Charitra is a beautiful little village around Ayodhya in Uttar Pradesh. All around it is a thick growth of banyan, pipal, mango, tamarind, guava, and pomegranate trees. A forest of rose apples spreads out on all sides. There is a constant chirping of birds. The sweet notes of koyal, mena, devchakali, the parrot, and the peacock fill the air and enliven the atmosphere. The whole village looks enchanting with its tiny streets and charming temples and houses. It is the 9th of Chaitra Sud of the year somewhat 1837, April 3rd, 1781, and the time is 10 o'clock at night. The atmosphere in and around the house of Dharmadev is one of rejoicing. Outside the house, children are dancing with joy. Women are going to Dharmadev's house singing and laughing. They are carrying in their hands large plates filled with vermilion powder, kumkum and gulal, garlands of flowers, and silken clothes. People are gathering all around the house. Outside, the Brahmins are reciting sacred hymns, mantras at the sacrificial altar. Dharmadev is seen giving away ornaments, clothes, and cows to Brahmins, sages, and to the poor. Rows of lighted lamps arranged one above the other have made the whole house glow with brightness. Drums and pipes are playing soulful tunes. But why all these festivities here tonight? Because a son is born to Dharmadev and Bhakti Mata. And it is Purna Purushottam Narayan himself who is born to Bhakti Mata. God himself has taken the form of this newborn baby. The body of the child gives out a shining luster which fills the whole house. Everyone is astonished to see such radiance. The gods shower flowers and sandalwood paste from the sky. Seated in their heavenly chariots, they fly in to have darshan of Dharmadev's son. Trumpets of victory
Chapter 3.
are sounded all
Bala
around.
Prabhu's exploits. Many stories are told of the miracles of his childhood. There was a demon named Kalidatta. He was king of the sinners. He became very upset and confused when he came to know that God had taken birth as a baby boy in Dharmadev's house. One day, early in the morning, he ordered all the Krityas to go to Dharmadev's house and somehow put an end to Bala Prabhu's life. So the Krityas came to Chapaya village and began to look for Dharmadev's house. The demonesses were all extremely dark in color, with blood-red eyes, big pointed teeth, ugly faces, and frightful voices. When they found Dharmadev's house, they peeped in quietly and saw Bhaktimata suckling the child. So they slowly stepped in and quickly, lifting the baby from the lap of his mother before she knew what was happening, ran away towards the mango grove. In the mango grove resided Hanumanji, son of the god of wind. Seeing that the demonesses were carrying away Balaprabhu, he at once got up, took a few long jumps, and soon caught up with them. He took Balaprabhu from the hands of an old Kritya who was carrying him. Hanumanji then caught hold of all the demonesses, tied their pigtails to his own tail, and lashed it violently against the ground. He then pulled some of them by the hair and gave them a sound thrashing. Others he lifted high, whirled them round and round, and finally hurled them to the ground. They cried with pain, for all their bones were cracked to bits. With tears in their eyes, they asked to be forgiven. "Please let us go," they pleaded. "We shall never come again to Chapaya." After a great deal of entreaty, Hanumanji let the demonesses go, after which they scampered off into the distance. Hanumanji thereafter quickly jumped his way back to the village, and gave Balaprabhu to Bhaktimata. He prostrated himself before her and said, "This your child is the Lord himself, and I am his humble servant. Please call me whenever protection is necessary. I shall be at your service." Bhaktimata, who was stricken with grief, was now greatly relieved. She took the child in her lap, pressed him to her bosom, and fondled him with greater affection than ever. The Krityas came back to Kalidatta and confessed that the attempt had failed. Then they declared with one voice, "We shall never again go to Chapaya to bring Balaprabhu. He has a bodyguard named Hanuman. This Hanuman is a terrible fellow. He nearly beat us to death." On hearing this, Kalidatta became furious. He sent another demoness, Gotra, the eldest of the Krityas, with instructions to kill Balaprabhu by whatever means she could find. Gotra came and stood before Balaprabhu's house. She waited for Balaprabhu to be left alone. But the Lord is all-knowing. He just took one single look at Gotra from the corner of his eye. Lo and behold, Gotra started burning. Flames gushed out from all parts of her body. "Oh God, I am burning, I am dying," she screamed. Thus shrieking and struggling with the flames, she died on the spot. And so Gotra, though as powerful as a giant, was within a short time reduced to ashes by the Lord. The children of the village were terrified to see Gotra's body in flames. Older people were speechless with fright. Dharmadev and Bhaktimata were also alarmed by the attempts to murder their child. They took Balaprabhu inside. They realized that they should take greater care in the future. Chapter 5. The Lord Gets a Name. Once when the Lord was 3 months old, sage Markandeya came to Dharmadev's house. Dharmadev received him warmly, gave him the best seat in the house to sit on, and made respectful obeisance to him. Then he asked a favor. "O revered sage, you are a renowned and learned astrologer. Will you kindly give my son a name and foretell his future?" The sage Markandeya thereupon opened his book of astrology and began to count on his fingers. After some time, he smilingly said, "Your son is born under the sign of Cancer, in the zodiac, Kark Rashi. So his name will be Hari. Since he has a dark complexion, he will also be known by the name Krishna. A combination of the two will give Hari Krishna. People will also call him Ghanshyam. Your son professes all the higher virtues, like austerity, piety, morality, truthfulness, and discretion. So he will also be known as Nilkant. He has great powers of meditation and will one day renounce the world. Your son will restore religion to its rightful place on earth and relieve the miseries of the people. Thus his fame will spread throughout the country. He will help people attain the state of trance and show them the way to deliverance. He will inspire them to sing devotional songs and bestow happiness upon all." Dharmadev was overjoyed to hear all this. He gave new clothes, ornaments, cows, and gold coins to the sage as dakshina
Chapter
when the
6,
sage
a
bade him
test for the
farewell.
sun. Once out of curiosity, Dharmadev wanted to test the sun. He sent for a small stool and had it covered with a piece of silk. Then he placed a sona mohar, a book, and a small sword on it. Having done so, he and Bhakti Mata sat near the stool and waited with great interest to see which of the three things placed on the stool the Lord would pick up. Within a short time, the Lord got down from his cradle and went to the stool and picked up the book. The sight gladdened the heart of both father and mother, who were now convinced that their son would study all the scriptures
Chapter
and
7.
become a great
The
scholar
Lord
one
has
day.
earrings. When Ghanshyam was 7 months old, Bhakti Mata thought it was time for him to have earrings. So she took Ghanshyam out and sat on a platform at the foot of a theremin tree just opposite their house. The man whose job it was to cut a hole through Ghanshyam's earlobes came along. He approached Ghanshyam with a needle and tried gently to get a hold on the ear. But no sooner did he grip the ear than a dazzling light began to flash from all over Ghanshyam's body, which blinded the man's eyes. Wherever he turned his eyes, he only saw the dazzle. He was so frightened that he gave a loud scream. Just then, Ghanshyam withdrew the light back into his body and disappeared from his mother's lap. His mother looked around anxiously for her son. She soon saw him sitting on a branch off the theremin tree. She at once sent for her older son Rampratap Bhai and asked him to climb the tree and bring Ghanshyam safely down to the ground. However, when Rampratap Bhai climbed the tree, he was surprised to find that Ghanshyam was nowhere to be seen in the tree, but was sitting beside his mother on the ground below. So he got down and went back to his mother. There was Ghanshyam sitting beside her. But again, there was a surprise awaiting him, for when he looked up, he saw Ghanshyam sitting up on the tree as well. Thus, for a long time, Ghanshyam was visible to Rampratap Bhai at two separate places at the same time. This frightened the man who was to make a hole in Ghanshyam's ears all the more. Then, Ghanshyam made his image on the tree disappear and said, "Mother, I shall have a hole made in my ears if you give me some molasses to eat." On hearing this, Bhakti Mata said, "You will certainly get your molasses, provided you behave properly and remain quiet for the man to do his job." So saying, she sent for molasses from inside the house and gave them to Ghanshyam to eat. Thereupon, Ghanshyam sat on his mother's lap quietly, and with molasses in his mouth, allowed the man to
A
proceed
boon
with
for
his work.
Lakshmiji. Bhakti Mata was now teaching Ghanshyam how to walk. One day, she held him by the hand and made him walk down the courtyard outside the house. After walking for some time, Ghanshyam sat down in the courtyard. At that time, Lakshmiji was passing across the sky with her friends. When she saw Ghanshyam, she told one of her friends, "I want you to take the form of a sparrow and go sit at the door of Ghanshyam's house. And when Ghanshyam comes to catch you, you should fly away and wait for him at some other place. Thus keep Ghanshyam running after you, but don't get caught in his hands." So saying, Lakshmiji made herself invisible and settled down to watch Ghanshyam at play with the bird. Soon a sparrow came hopping around and sat at the door of Ghanshyam's house. Ghanshyam at once stretched his hands and deftly caught the sparrow with his hand. The sparrow flopped and fluttered very hard, but could not free herself from Ghanshyam's clutches. So she began to scream aloud. When Bhakti Mata saw this, she became very nervous, for if the sparrow picked at Ghanshyam's soft hand, it might bleed. So she snatched the sparrow from Ghanshyam's hand and put it down on the ground. No sooner did she do so than a beautiful lady sprang up from the sparrow. She bowed to Ghanshyam and said, "I am Lakshmiji's friend. She asked me to take the form of a sparrow and come play with you. I am afraid my beak has struck you in the palm. Please forgive me." Ghanshyam quickly forgave her and also blessed her. By that time, Lakshmiji also came up. She bowed to Ghanshyam with folded hands, and in a humble voice requested him to give her a chance to serve him. Ghanshyam agreed to her request. "Come to Kathiawad when I go there," he said, "and I shall grant you your desire." Lakshmiji was greatly pleased to hear this, And after receiving Ghanshyam's
Chapter 9.
blessings, she went
Siddhis
away
at his
to-
service. Our Lord had a maternal aunt named Lakshmibai. One morning, she asked Bhaktimata, "What shall I cook today?" Bhaktimata replied, "There is no hurry. When you find time, you may cook Shira." So Lakshmibai went to the kitchen and began to prepare food in a leisurely way. However, as it was getting late and Lakshmibai took a long time to cook a meal, Bhaktimata felt very hungry. When Balaprabhu came to know about it, he inwardly instructed the 8 siddhis to bring food at once. In no time, all the 8 siddhis descended from the sky. They were extremely beautiful, as graceful and charming as the apsaras of heaven. They had put on fine, colorful dresses, and each of them carried a plate in her hands. The plates were full of 32 varieties of delicious food. Bhaktimata was surprised to see these beautiful women in her house. The siddhis said, "Mother, we are siddhis. As you are feeling hungry, Balaprabhu asked us to bring food for you. We have brought many delicious dishes on these plates. Please be good enough to partake of them." When Balaprabhu saw this, he came down from his cradle, ate a little from each plate himself, and then asked his mother to eat. Bhaktimata also ate. No sooner had she finished than Lakshmibai came from the kitchen with hot shira. She was greatly surprised to see the 8 siddhis there, and the plates full of many varieties of food. Then the siddhis offered to bring food every day. They said, "Mother, we shall bring a plate full of delicacies for you every day." But the Lord asked them not to bring food every day, but only when his aunt was unable to cook the day's meal in time. Each one of the siddhis then prostrated herself before the
Chapter
Lord
10,
and disappeared
Playing
into
with
the
the
sky.
moon. It was a beautiful night of the full moon. The whole place was bright with light from the moon. The Lord was sleeping in his cradle. All the others in the house were also fast asleep. There was an open window high up on the wall opposite the cradle, and through this window the light of the moon was falling on the Lord's face. Suddenly the Lord was awakened. As he looked up, he saw the moon as if framed in the window. Now he wanted to play with the moon. So while still lying in his cradle, he stretched out his hand, caught a hold of the moon, and drew it into the room. The moon also became like a small child and began to play with the Lord. The house was filled with light. When suddenly Bhaktimata woke up, she saw the whole house shining with moonlight. She became frightened to see the Lord playing with the moon. "Don't be scared, mother," the Lord assured her. "The moon has come to play with me. I myself made it come here." Bhaktimata was greatly relieved and was secretly very happy. Then the moon bowed to the mother and went
Chapter
back
11.
to its place in the
Milk
sky.
and cake for Hodgepodge. At noon one day, Ghanshyam felt hungry and asked Bhaktimata to give him some food to eat. Mother promptly gave him cold hodgepodge, khichdi. "Start eating this, my darling," she said. "I shall soon bring some milk for you." So saying, she went to the cow pen. There was a cow named Gomti in the pen. She was milked twice a day, in the morning and in the evening. Bhaktimata began to draw milk from her, but to her surprise, no milk would flow from her udders. By that time, Ghanshyam too came to the cowshed with a glass in his hand. When his mother saw him, she asked him to go back and wait patiently, as it would take some time to get milk from the cow. However, Gomti was very fond of Ghanshyam. If Ghanshyam wanted milk, she was ready to give it at any time. So when Ghanshyam held the glass under the cow's udders, a stream of milk began to flow, and the glass became filled in no time. She hoped she could collect some more milk, so she rushed inside and brought a metal pot, and when she held it in place, it too became full and soon overflowed, but still the milk did not stop flowing. Thereupon Bhaktimata again went in and brought a bigger pot. That too was filled up in no time. Bhaktimata now started worrying that if the flow did not stop, all the vessels in the house would be filled only with milk. However, Ghanshyam put her fears at ease. "Mother, don't be afraid," he said. "You will not have to fetch any more vessels now. Gomti gave milk because I wanted it. Now I don't want any more, and so it will stop flowing." Still, Bhaktimata was not so sure, and again she went back to fetch a pot. When she returned, the milk had stopped flowing. Bhaktimata was astounded to witness such a miracle, but naturally she felt proud of her son. She thought, "Since there is so much milk, let me prepare some sweet milk." So she told Ghanshyam, "You need not eat cold hodgepodge anymore, my son. I shall soon prepare sweet milk and fried cake." Within a short time, she cooked a meal consisting of sweet milk and fried
Chapter
cake
12,
and lovingly
The
fed
Barber
her son.
Sees a Miracle. Ghanshyam was now in his third year. His dutiful and virtuous father thought it was time to give his son a haircut. So the next day, at an auspicious time, he sent for Amai, the barber. The latter soon turned up with his shaving kit. Bhaktimata took Ghanshyam in her lap and sat down facing eastward. Amai got out his razor and began to shave Ghanshyam's head. When the shaving was half finished, Ghanshyam became invisible to the barber. While everyone else could still see Ghanshyam sitting in his mother's lap, Amai alone could not see him. So he got alarmed. His arm, upraised with the razor in it, stood transfixed in the air. Seeing this, Bhaktimata asked him with surprise, "What are you looking at? Come on, finish the shaving." In a trembling voice, Amai replied, "What can I do, Mataji? How can I shave him when I cannot see him?" Hearing this, Bhaktimata whispered to Ghanshyam, "A half-shaven head will not make you presentable, so do let him finish his job. Reappear to Amai, my dear." Thereupon Ghanshyam looked at Amai and became visible to him. Amai then went on to complete the shave. He was now convinced that the child was God himself, and so he prostrated himself before him, receiving his blessings, and then went his way, happy in mind. Ghanshyam took a bath in the lake Narayan Sarovar. Dharmadev gave dakshina to all Brahmins and distributed patasa to all. He was then engaged in the arrangements of giving
Chapter
dinner
13.
to the
Kalidatta meets his end. The same day, as Dharmadev and Bhaktimata were busy with their work, they forgot about their son for some time, and Ghanshyam's friends came running to him so they could play together. They all ran to the mango garden east of Narayan Sarovar, laughing and jumping, and began to play. As they were playing, Kalidatta the demon came upon the scene. He decided that he would carry away all the children and kill Ghanshyam. And so he stretched out his hand to catch hold of Ghanshyam. Ghanshyam gave him a scornful look, and the demon began to burn with anger. With his magical power, he created a severe cyclone, which carried torrential rains. Everything was plunged into darkness. The children began to shiver because of the biting cold. Kalidatta began to give out loud shrieks to frighten the children. All the children hid themselves in the hollow of a big banyan tree. But Ghanshyam went and sat under a mango tree at a short distance. Kalidatta was shouting and searching for Ghanshyam. At last he saw Ghanshyam sitting under the mango tree. So he lifted his body high up in the sky and came down on the tree with tremendous force. Some branches fell with a crash. Kalidatta began to laugh in triumph, thinking that Ghanshyam was completely crushed under the tree. He began to remove the fallen branches one by one in hope of finding Ghanshyam's shattered body, but the branch on which Ghanshyam was sitting had not collapsed. Kalidatta was mystified and also terribly angry at the sight. Seeing this, Ghanshyam shot one burning glance at Kalidatta. Almost immediately, Kalidatta found his body lifted by an unknown force and hurled against the tree repeatedly until he fell dead. Ghanshyam then, by his divine power, caused the cyclone and the rain to stop. The weather became bright and clear. Ghanshyam's friends came out of the hollow of the banyan tree, and not finding Ghanshyam, began to search for him. Meanwhile, Bhaktimata remembered her son, and she, along with her husband and other relatives, began to look for him anxiously, and at last came to the mango tree. There they found him. Bhaktimata lifted her son and fondly pressed him to her bosom. Finding Ghanshyam back in their midst, the children also rejoiced, and went away, laughing and jumping as before,
Chapter 14,
back to their
Killing
homes.
Smallpox. It was summertime and the heat was excessive. Ghanshyam was down with fever, so did not take any food. When news of this reached Aunt Jannamasi, she came to inquire about him. When she saw Ghanshyam, she realized that he was suffering from smallpox. So she advised her sister to put him to bed in one of the more secluded rooms. Bhakti Mata at once put Ghanshyam to sleep and then prayed to God. Then her sister-in-law, Lakshmi Bai, came to see him, and finding high fever and the pox on Ghanshyam's body, she said, "It will be advisable not to allow him to go out, or to wash, or even to let him touch water for 20 days. When Ghanshyam heard of this, he said, "How could I go without my usual bath? We are Brahmins, and it is our duty to take a bath every day. So please bring me some cold water. I am sure when I take a cold water bath, the smallpox and the fever will both disappear." Bhakti Mata believed his words. She took him to the well, drew cold water from it, and bathed him in it. When, after pouring a few buckets of cold water on him, she felt his body and found to her delight and relief that the smallpox had subsided and the fever too had gone down. Only a few dim spots were left on his body. Seeing the miraculous transformation, both Jannamasi and Lakshmi Bai thought that this child must surely be God himself. They bowed down to Ghanshyam and smiling
15.
went back home.
Fish brought back to life. In Chapaya one day, Ghanshyam called out to his friends, Vani, Madhav, and Prag, and proposed that they should go to Mean Lake for a bath. The friends were delighted at the suggestion, and they all went to Mean Lake. A banyan tree stood on the banks of the lake. The boys began to take off their clothes in the shadow of the tree. Meanwhile, Ghanshyam's eyes fell on a lone fisherman. He was a dark, tall, well-built man. He was catching fish and putting them in a basket. Ghanshyam saw a heap of fish in the basket. His heart bled at the sight of so many dead fish. He vowed that the fish shall be brought back to life. No sooner said than done. Within a second, all the fish had regained their life and leapt back into the water. The fisherman was very angry. He got out of the water and rushed at Ghanshyam to beat him up. Ghanshyam thought that the pride of a proud man should be broken. One who kills living beings must be punished. So he took the form of Yamraj, the god of death, and walked up to the fisherman. Yamraj's appearance is frightening and awesome. He has a big mustache, sharp, protruding teeth, blood-red eyes, and a long tongue that hangs out of his mouth. He has 18 hands, and each one holds a weapon, such as a sword, spear, trident. The fisherman became terrified at the sight of Yamraj. His hands and legs began to tremble. Precipitation ran down his face and body. Yamraj showed him in a vision the punishments that awaits the wicked and the sinful in Yampuri, hell. Then he got him soundly thrashed by his attendants. The man's bones were shattered by the hard beating he got, and he began to scream with pain. "Please save me from this. Please let me go." In the end, the man realized his wickedness. He asked for forgiveness. "My bones are all broken. I am frightened, and I shiver when I think of Yampuri and the terrors of hell. Please forgive me. I shall not henceforth catch or kill fish. You are God incarnate. Please set me free from my past sins." So saying, he prostrated himself before Ghanshyam. Ghanshyam gave him his blessings and let him go. Ghanshyam and his friends then had their bath
Chapter
in the lake
16,
and returned home.
Sparrows sent into a trance. Near Chapaya is Dargam. On its outskirts was a field belonging to Dharmadev. One day Bhakti Mata told Ghanshyam, "My dear son, the paddy in our field is now ripe with grain, but the sparrows are spoiling the crop. Besides, your father and elder brother are going away to a neighboring village today on some urgent work. Will you therefore go look after the field?" Ghanshyam readily agreed. Bhakti Mata served him food, put a cap on his head, and gave him a pair of velvet slippers to wear. She also put a long stick in his hand. When he was fully equipped, she sent him out to guard the field against the sparrows. Ghanshyam, playing with the stick, soon reached the field. As he climbed a small rose apple tree on the way, he saw hundreds of sparrows hovering above the field. Some were sitting on trees, some were pecking at the corn, yet others were just flitting from place to place. Ghanshyam thought, I do not want to harm these sparrows. What then shall I do? A new idea occurred to him. He put out a soft, mellow, rhythmic sound for the sparrows to hear. Lo and behold! All the sparrows fell into a deep trance. Wherever they were and whatever they were doing, they became still and silent at once. While the sparrows were in the trance, Ghanshyam went away to Madhav Shukla's field nearby. There he played with his friends Raghuvir and Buxram. Evening fell. Dharmadev and Rampratap came to the field to fetch Ghanshyam, but Ghanshyam was not there. They searched and at last found him playing in another nearby field. Dharmadev called him and said in a tone of rebuke, What did mother tell you? Were you not sent here to look after the crops? Ghanshyam calmly replied, Father, let us go to the field and see how things are. When they went back to the field, they saw the sparrows transfixed in their places. Some were lying on the field, some sitting on the trees. Some others had corn in their beaks, but they were all hushed and motionless, like a picture. Dharmadev was greatly surprised. He wondered whether all the sparrows had suddenly frozen to death. Both he and Rampratap stood speechless for some time. Ghanshyam then gave a louder recall, and in an instant all the sparrows began to stir. Then they spread their wings and flew away. Father and brother could not but believe that Ghanshyam was no other than God supreme in man's guise. The lives of all living beings are in his hands, they said. He can play with our lives as much as he likes. Thinking such thoughts, they
Chapter
returned
17,
home with
A Monkey in a
Ghanshyam.
Trance. As the harassment by the demons was increasing, Dharmadev decided to leave the place and go to Ayodhya. He put all the furniture and other goods in a decorated cart, and the whole family started for Ayodhya. After a while, they reached the bank of the river Saryu. There they all got down. The luggage was then placed in a boat, and the boat carrying the family soon reached Ayodhya on the opposite bank of the Saryu. They soon took a beautiful house in the Brahat street of the town. One morning, they all sat down to dinner as usual, with Ghanshyam sitting next to his father. Bhaktimata was serving the food. Just then, a monkey on a tree opposite saw Ghanshyam eating his meal, crying, Hoop, hoop, hoop! The monkey came up to the veranda and with a sudden dash carried away a whole lot of chapatis. He then took another long jump and got back to the tree. As the monkey sat munching bits of chapati, Ghanshyam gave the monkey a steady look, and the monkey fell into a trance straight away with the chapati still in his hands. For 3 days the monkey remained in his trance and sat there motionless. When he woke up from the trance after 3 days, he hopped to Ghanshyam's house and sat at his feet with folded hands. Ghanshyam blessed him and also gave him something to eat. The monkey received the blessings, ate what was given to him by Ghanshyam, and then went back quietly and contentedly to the tree,
Chapter 18,
which was his home.
Monkeys get a sound thrashing. Once, Ghanshyam took a few fried cakes and curd on his plate and sat down to eat in the veranda. A monkey, intent on mischief, came up with a leap. He snatched the fried cakes from Ghanshyam's plate, leaped back onto the branch of the tamarind tree, and sat there with what looked like a mocking smile. Ghanshyam stretched out his hand, caught a hold of the monkey by the neck, and dashed him against the ground. The monkey began to yell with pain. Hearing the yells, a score of other monkeys came running up. They all yelled and jumped, and decided to beat up Ghanshyam. Slowly, they surrounded him from all sides. Dharmadev saw this. Fearing that the monkeys might kill Ghanshyam, he went inside to fetch a stick. In the meantime, Ghanshyam assumed as many separate forms of himself as there were monkeys. Each of his forms ran after one of the monkeys. The monkeys got frightened at seeing so many separate forms of one person, Ghanshyam. Ghanshyam hurled some of the monkeys away by catching a hold of their ears, and some others by catching them by the leg. Yet others he took by the tail, and rolled them round and threw them off. The rest shrieked and yelled out of fright, and ran away as fast as they could. Ghanshyam then made all his other forms disappear. In a short while, his father came out with a big stick. He found that all the monkeys had run away. He was so glad to witness yet another one of Ghanshyam's miracles. He became quite sure that his son was no other.
Ramdat is taught a lesson. Once in Chapaya, Ghanshyam called out his friends for a bath in the lake. The boys got ready, and led by Ghanshyam, they all went to the lake. When they got there, they jumped into the water, played hide-and-seek, swam for a long time, and in the end felt very hungry. Ghanshyam then took his friends to the mango garden. There was a big mango tree in the grove by the side of the road, which was full of ripe, tempting mangoes. Ghanshyam climbed up the tree, while the other boys waited below. Ghanshyam began to pick the ripe mangoes from the tree and throw them down, and Vani, Madhav, and Prag caught them as soon as they fell in a piece of cloth stretched out under the tree. The rest of the boys kept watch. Meanwhile, a big crowd of Brahmins was passing by, led by their leader called Ramdat. Ramdat was a tall, tough man. He asked his companions to get hold of the mangoes as soon as they fell. When they came near the tree, Vani tried to stop them with the warning, "These mangoes have been picked by us. If you want any mangoes, go and get them from the tree yourself." Ramdat lost his temper. Rolling his big eyes, he tried to scare away the boys. He even tried to snatch the mangoes forcibly. Ghanshyam was watching all this. Seeing the Brahmin's impudence, Ghanshyam came down quickly to the lowest branch and bent down. As Ramdat was busy snatching at the mangoes, Ghanshyam lifted the drinking pot that was hanging on the string from the Brahmin's shoulder and rushed back to the top of the tree. Ramdat's anger knew no bounds. He climbed up the tree with the object of catching Ghanshyam and pushing him off the tree. But Ghanshyam kept Ramdat chasing after him from one branch to another without falling into his hands. Ramdat was at his wit's end. He asked the other Brahmins who were standing below to come up and help him catch Ghanshyam. So, one by one, they all climbed up the tree, and each one sat on a separate branch. Ghanshyam then climbed up to the topmost branch. Ramdat also began to climb after him to the topmost branch, but before he could reach to the top, Ghanshyam had disappeared. When the Brahmins looked down, they saw Ghanshyam standing below and teasing Ramdat by holding aloft the drinking pot with the string. Then Ghanshyam told his friends, "Don't allow a single Brahmin to get down. Let us keep throwing small stones at them." So they all began to hurl stones at the Brahmins. The Brahmins became tired and completely exhausted with the effort to avoid the stones that were ceaselessly aimed at them. At last they realized their folly in fighting Ghanshyam. They thought that this boy must surely be God himself, for how else could you explain his disappearance from the tree? When at last they beseeched him to stop the attack, Ghanshyam agreed, and the Brahmins were free to get away. The Brahmins then came and expressed regret to Ghanshyam. Ghanshyam returned to them the drinking pot. After paying homage to him, the Brahmins
went their way. Are the aspirants to be found? There was a pipal tree outside the village of Chapaya. Ghanshyam was very fond of it. Very often he would stop playing with his friends and climb on the pipal tree. He would sit there for a long time, looking in the western direction. His friends could not understand this behavior of Ghanshyam. One day, as usual, Ghanshyam left his friends in the middle of a game. He climbed the pipal tree and sat on a high branch and began looking in the western direction. Seriousness and concentration writ large on his face. His friend Veni saw all this. Ghanshyam sat on the tree till late in the evening, and then got down from the tree to go home. Immediately, Veni went up to him, put his hands around his shoulders, and asked him softly, "What are you looking at in the western direction, sitting all day high up in that tree, Ghanshyam?" Ghanshyam replied, "My dear friend, I am trying to see in which direction devotees who aspire salvation, mumukshus, are found. Thousands of miles away from our village in the western direction is situated the land of Gujarat and Kathiawar. Sri Krishna's Badrika also lies there. Many saintly souls yearning to meet the Lord are living in that country. One day I propose to go there. Of course, I want to see the sacred places in Himalayas and elsewhere in India too, but I want to live in Kathiawar. The devotees of that place are calling me. I have to answer their call." Veni could not follow what Ghanshyam really meant. He simply took Ghanshyam's hand and began to walk towards
Chapter
home,
21
slowly
is
and
seen
silently.
simultaneously at many temples. One day, it so happened that Ghanshyam did not come back for the midday meal. Bhaktimata asked Rampratapai to go and bring Ghanshyam home from wherever he was. Rampratapai went straight to Hanumangadi. There he found that the story of Ramayana was being told as usual, and Ghanshyam was wholly engrossed in listening to it. Rampratapai approached him and asked him to come home with him. "I will come soon," said Ghanshyam, and asked Rampratapai to go. There were many temples on the way, so Rampratapai thought he might just as well have darshan of the deity. Accordingly, he entered one of the temples. Imagine his surprise when he found that Ghanshyam was present in that temple too, sitting and listening to the story of Ramayana. Out of curiosity, Rampratapai went back to the temple at Hanumangadi, and sure enough, Ghanshyam was there listening as before to the priest's narration of Ram's story. He was amazed. Again, in order to make double sure, he went to the other temples on the way home. One after another, he saw Ghanshyam everywhere, in all the temples, all at the same time, absorbed in the Ramayana. Despite his previous knowledge of Ghanshyam's divinity, he could not help wondering at the phenomenon. Returning home, he related his experience of this new miracle to Dharmadev and Bhaktimata. All who heard the story were also surprised, but supremely happy. By then, Ghanshyam returned home. He washed his hands and feet, and then quietly sat down to lunch with his father and brothers, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Bhaktimata fed Ghanshyam that day with even greater
Chapter
love and
22,
devotion
The
than
Ghost
before.
Well. Once the Nawab came to Ayodhya. He was such a tyrant that whichever village he went to, he harassed the villagers there in many harsh ways. He kidnapped the children and he robbed the people. Worried at this, Dharmadev took his family to Tinla to stay there for a few days, and thus escaped the Nawab's tyranny. A man called Pratit Pandey lived there. He had a wife called Vachnabin. Dharmadev's family went to stay with them. Vachnabin served delicious food to Ghanshyam every day. Bhaktimata helped her in her work. She also drew water from the well and brought it to the home in large pots. But there was danger if one went to the well after sunset. It was Vachnabin who warned Bhaktimata, "You should never go to the well to fetch water after sunset. There are thousands of ghosts in the well, and they will worry and vex you to death. So never go to the well after the day has ended." One evening, it so happened that all the water in the house had been used up. The sun had already set, but unfortunately Bhaktimata was not aware of this. So by sheer ignorance, she went to the well to fetch water. She tied a rope around the neck of the pot and let it down into the well. Before the pot could touch the water, the ghost seized it. Bhaktimata pulled hard at the rope, but the rope would not move. She peeped into the well, and there she saw thousands of ghosts lying inside. She became terrified and hurried back home. When she returned, she was perspiring all over with fear. Seeing her in such a piteous condition, Ghanshyam asked her, "What happened, mother? Why did you come back home so hurriedly? Where did you leave the pot and the rope?" Bhaktimata told him about the ghost that she saw. The next morning, Ghanshyam decided to go down the well. The villagers rushed to him and tried to dissuade him from jumping in. "Don't go in there," they warned. "The ghosts will eat you up." But Ghanshyam did not pay any heed to their warning and leaped into the well straight away. As soon as he reached the bottom, the ghosts started up from their sleep. When they tried to get a hold of Ghanshyam, his body began to radiate streaks of brilliant light. Soon the ghosts themselves were on fire, produced by the heat so created. The ghosts begged to be forgiven for trying to assault Ghanshyam. Ghanshyam asked them, "How many do you happen to be here?" One of the ghosts replied, "Many years ago, we were men like others, but we were bad people. We ate meat, took liquor, gambled, and told lies. We got into big quarrels with the king. There was heavy fighting, and we were all slain at this very spot. But as we were sinners, we have to live our lives here as ghosts. We pray to you, O Lord. Forgive our past sins. Save us from this well in which we are imprisoned." Hearing their plea, Ghanshyam condoned their sins, delivered them from bondage, and sent them to Badrika Ashram. After that, there was not a single ghost in the well. People would go at any time of the day to fetch water. They all praised Ghanshyam
Chapter
and paid
23.
homage to him.
The wrestlers are defeated. In Ayodhya, Ghanshyam used to practice wrestling every evening at Rajghat with Kesara Singh and other friends. One morning, as he was wrestling with Kesara Singh, another wrestler named Mahabali from Nepal came along. Mahabali was a tall, tough, and strongly built man. He had defeated many a wrestler in public contests. Seeing Ghanshyam execute various kinds of maneuvers in wrestling, Mahabali began to laugh. So Ghanshyam challenged him to a match and showed that he had in him strength equal to that of 10,000 elephants. News of Mahabali's defeat at the hands of Ghanshyam spread round the city of Ayodhya and the neighboring villages. Ghanshyam became famous everywhere. When some of the more renowned wrestlers of Ayodhya, such as Mansang, Dilisang, and Bhimsang, came to know of this, they became jealous. They went to the king Raidarshan Singh and said, "We shall wrestle with Ghanshyam and defeat him." The king, who knew about Ghanshyam, tried to dissuade them by saying, "Ghanshyam may look like a child, but in reality he is God incarnate. Nobody can defeat God. You will never win in any fight with him, so desist from your foolish resolve." But the three wrestlers would not listen. They were adamant. Boastfully, they said to the king, "Your Majesty, you will see whether we can throw Ghanshyam to the ground before your very eyes or not. Give us a fitting reward if we win the match." The king agreed. "All right," he said, "go and prepare for the games. I am also coming to witness your display. You boast a great deal, but take care that you do not get defeated in the end and suffer disgrace." But the three wrestlers continued to boast, "Ghanshyam is nothing before us. We shall beat him as easily as we can beat a mosquito." In a short time, a proclamation was issued through all the streets of Ayodhya city by beat of drum. Under the orders of His Majesty the King, the three wrestlers, Bhimsang, Dilisang, and Mansang, will fight a wrestling match with Ghanshyam this evening at the maiden near the well by the side of the tamarind tree before the house of Dharmadev. His Majesty the King will be present to witness the fight. All the citizens of Ayodhya are requested to be present in time. Some servants of the king came to clean up the maiden near the well. Other servants began to get the mandap ready. Very soon all the preparations were completed. Special seats with thick cushions and mattresses were arranged for the king and his courtiers. Flags and buntings were put up. Dharmadev was deeply worried. "What if the giant wrestlers kill my little son? My son is on trial. The king himself is coming to see the match. What will happen now?" Seeing his father in such deep anxiety, Ghanshyam reassured him. "Don't be afraid, father. Don't worry at all. God is with us." So saying, Ghanshyam suddenly grew bigger and bigger, and soon showed himself in the proportions of a giant wrestler. Then, after a while, he drew in that form within himself, and shrunk to his original size. Seeing this, Dharmadev and Bhaktimata felt certain that he would be more than a match for the giant wrestlers of the day, and stopped worrying. Evening came. Large crowds gathered to see the king and to witness Ghanshyam bring the pride of the three big wrestlers down to dust. Presently, the arrival of the king and his courtiers was announced. Dharmadev and Rampratapai too arrived with Ghanshyam. Seeing Ghanshyam, the oldest of the three wrestlers, Bhimsang produced a loud sound by striking his hand on his thigh, and then roared, "Come on here into the ring. Today we shall demonstrate our might to you." Ghanshyam went inside the ring with a confident smile on his lips. Bhimsang then took a huge, thick iron chain, tied it to his right leg, and stood still in the middle of the ring. And then he threw down a challenge before the assembled citizens. "My right leg possesses a strength equal to that of 100 elephants. I shall concede Ghanshyam to be the stronger of us two, if only he can make me fall or move my right leg by pulling the chain." Ghanshyam first prostrated at his father's feet, and then went to the arena. After bending down, he lifted the chain with his left hand without effort, and then, with a single pull at the chain, threw Bhimsang off his balance, all in no time. The chain broke in two. Bhimsang found himself hurled against the tamarind tree. Blood streamed from his nose and mouth. At this stunning defeat, Bhimsang could not control his rage. He fretted and fumed, and taking up another chain, he challenged Ghanshyam again. "O Ghanshyam, if you think you are all that strong, then tie this chain to your leg and stand still as I did, and see how I can lift you and throw you down, after whirling you round and round." Ghanshyam replied, "Come along, I am ready for the challenge." Ghanshyam then tied the chain to his left leg, and stood stock still with his eyes closed. Bhimsang then pulled hard at the chain, but Ghanshyam's leg would not move at all. Then all the three wrestlers pulled their might together and began to pull at their hardest, but Ghanshyam's leg did not budge, even by an inch. The three then tried with a renewed vigor. Their nostrils blew up, and the knots in the lion cloths got loosened. But Ghanshyam stood firm as a rock. Seeing this, the whole crowd roared with laughter. Worsted in the match, the anger of the three wrestlers knew no bounds. With bloodshot eyes, they tried their last chance by using all their strength to pull at the chain. Then suddenly the chain broke into pieces, and the three men fell to the ground with a deafening thud. They were badly hurt. They could not even get up. All this time Ghanshyam was standing still and motionless at the same spot, with just the flicker of a smile on his face. King Raidarshan Singh then stood up to proclaim Ghanshyam's victory. He presented clothes and ornaments to him, as was the custom. Sweets were distributed to the people. The king asked the three wrestlers to apologize to Ghanshyam for bragging about their strength. Thereupon the three wrestlers humbled themselves before Ghanshyam and promised, "From now on we will never boast about our strength. You are God incarnate. Please forgive us." Ghanshyam gave them his blessings. Thereafter the king seated Dharmadev and Ghanshyam on an elephant, and took them triumphantly round the city in procession. Every house in Ayodhya celebrated Ghanshyam's victory.
The Greedy Confectioner. One morning, Subhasini Babi, brother's wife, was busy in the kitchen cooking food. Taking a ring off her finger, she put it on a stool nearby and proceeded to prepare the dough for making chapatis. After some time, Ghanshyam came in the kitchen. He was feeling hungry, but he found out that the food was not ready yet. So without Babi's knowledge, he secretly picked up the ring and went away. Now, in Ayodhya, there lived a confectioner who was well known for his greed. Ghanshyam went straight to him with the ring. Showing the ring to the man, he asked how many sweets would he give in exchange for the ring. The confectioner eyed the ring greedily and replied, "A pound of burfi." Ghanshyam thereupon told him, "I'm sorry, that is not enough for me. I shall go to another confectioner, or I will give you the ring if you serve me enough sweets to satisfy my appetite." The confectioner thought, "This little boy will not be able to eat large amount of sweets. At the most, he will consume about 5 pounds. So let me take the offer. I will get a costly ring in the bargain. My wife will be extremely happy if I present it to her." Thinking that he had made a good bargain, the confectioner said to Ghanshyam, "Very well, I shall give you enough sweets to satisfy your appetite if you give me the ring." So Ghanshyam passed the ring to the confectioner. The man took Ghanshyam inside the shop, asked him to sit down, and served him some sweets on a plate. Ghanshyam ate up the sweets in no time. The confectioner then gave him some more burfi, but that too was consumed within a couple of minutes. The confectioner replenished the plate with some more stuff. That too went down Ghanshyam's throat even as the man was serving. The luckless confectioner was now completely trapped. He showed signs of distress and alarm. Ghanshyam would not leave off. He held him to his promise and went on eating more and more. In this way, the whole stock of burfi was exhausted. The confectioner then served him pedas, another kind of sweetmeat. The pedas were also devoured with the same rapidity. Thus, one by one, Ghanshyam finished the confectioner's stock of jalebi, sata, mesur, gari, tor, and other sweetmeats sold in the shop. The confectioner was now quite desperate. "What shall I do now?" he asked himself. But Ghanshyam would not let him off. He complained that his stomach was not even half full. "So, let me have some more sweets, Shethji," he said. "I am dying of hunger. Else, give me the ring back." The confectioner had no answer to this. So he went and brought sweets from the 2 neighboring confectioner shops on credit and put them before Ghanshyam. That too disappeared in Ghanshyam's stomach in less than no time. The more the man gave, the more Ghanshyam asked. By now, all the stocks in the neighboring shops were also exhausted, and the confectioner was too sorely tired. His eyes seemed to be begging for mercy. But Ghanshyam insisted, "I am very hungry. If you cannot find any more sweets, bring ghee instead." The confectioner served him with a bowl full of ghee, which too was soon consumed. A few men from the king's palace and some Brahmins were standing outside and were watching the whole of this amazing drama being played out between a little boy and a crafty old shopkeeper. A time came when the confectioner had nothing whatever left to serve Ghanshyam. So both he and his wife fell at his feet and humbly told him, "O Ghanshyam, you must be God incarnate. Please be merciful. We shall stop being greedy and will not exploit others. We have been reduced to bankruptcy by trying to feed you. Nothing is now left for us to live on. Please, therefore, have mercy on us." After humbling the confectioner, Ghanshyam washed his hands and mouth, drank some water, and then went back home, leaving the ring with them. At home, everyone had finished their meal. They were all waiting for Ghanshyam. As soon as he came, Suhasini Bhabhi asked him, "Have you seen my ring by any chance, Ghanshyam?" Feigning complete innocence, Ghanshyam replied, "Oh, no, I have not seen it. You might have kept it somewhere yourself, Bhabhi." Hearing this, his younger brother, Icharam, intervened. "Ghanshyam has secretly taken the ring away. I saw it all through a crevice in the door. I am not lying." Fearing that a tiff might develop between the 2 brothers, Dharmadev called Ghanshyam and Icharam aside. Ghanshyam then confessed the truth. "Father, the ring is with the confectioner." So Dharmadev took them both to the confectioner's shop. Ghanshyam then spoke to the confectioner. "Return the ring to me. My father is scolding me for giving it to you." The confectioner angrily retorted, "You have eaten all my sweets and emptied my vessels, and now you dare come here with your father to ask for your ring? What cheek!" Ghanshyam was not upset. He said quietly, "Why do you lose your temper in presence of my father? Why don't you go and see before you speak? All your vessels are as full as ever. Do not return the ring if you find even a single vessel empty." Dharmadev then took the confectioner with him and went into the shop. They saw all the sweetmeat tins were full and overflowing. Even the pot of ghee was full to the brim. The confectioner was both surprised and delighted to see that the sweets were intact. He prostrated before Dharmadev and Ghanshyam. He asked to be forgiven and also returned the ring. Then Dharmadev came back home along with his 2 sons and restored the ring to its rightful owner.
Once Ghanshyam went to the village Targam with Rampratapai and Suvasini Babi. There was a small thicket at a short distance away from the house, and in the middle of the thicket there was a beautiful little tank. The tank was surrounded by green grass and many lovely flower trees. Cowboys took their cows to graze in the fields around. Ghanshyam used to go there to play. He would climb trees and play hide-and-seek with his friends. They would pick roses, jasmine, and other flowers. All his friends would make a garland of flowers and put it around Ghanshyam's neck. One evening, Ghanshyam was standing near the tank. The cowboys were returning home with their cows. Ghanshyam called out to the cows, and they all came running and stood round him. The cowboys tried very hard to call them back, but they would not budge from where they stood near Ghanshyam. Ghanshyam patted and caressed the cows for a while, and then said to the cows, "You can go now." The cows promptly obeyed, turned round, and then went home mooing. After the cows had gone, Ghanshyam climbed the tamarind tree that was standing on the bank of the tank. He amused himself there for some time, and then, as he climbed down, his foot slipped and he fell near the edge of the water. A stubble got stuck in his right thigh. Blood began to flow from the wound. His friends got alarmed. One of them, Sukhanand, ran to call Rampratapai. Meanwhile, Indra, Brahma, Vishnu, Chandra, and the other gods came down from the sky. Indra at once summoned Ashwini Kumar, the physician of the gods. Ashwini Kumar came hurriedly and fastened a bandage around it. All the gods then bowed to Ghanshyam and disappeared once more into the sky. By then, Rampratapai arrived on the scene, along with Sukhanand. He saw a bandage round Ghanshyam's thigh. "Who gave you medicine? Who applied the bandage, brother?" he inquired anxiously. Vani replied, "Ashwini Kumar, the physician of the gods, came down from the sky, applied the medicine, and put the bandage on." Rampratapai was overjoyed when he heard this. He then took Ghanshyam on his shoulder and brought him home in triumph. Suvasini Babi was waiting anxiously for Ghanshyam. When she saw him, she at once took him in her arms and pressed him lovingly to her bosom. Then she asked him where he was injured. He replied, "There was no injury at all, Babi." Then he loosened the bandage and showed her. Suvasini Babi did not see any injury. At the spot where the stubble had stuck, there was a faint mark. She was greatly relieved when she found that the boy was not hurt. Ever since this incident occurred, the tank has been known as Kampa Talauri,
Chapter
or
26,
the stubble.
The 16 Signs of God. Once, Dharmadev and Bhakti Mata went on a pilgrimage, taking the 3 sons with them. Vasantabai and Chandamasi also accompanied them. On the way, they came up to a village called Gonda. There was a small temple in the village, and in the temple was installed a small image of Thakurji. In the evening, at prayer time, Dharmadev took his 3 sons to the temple for Thakurji's darshan. The bells rang, the gong sounded, and the drums rolled. Their mingled sounds reverberated from the wall on all sides of the temple. The worship of Thakurji began with the aarti. Ghanshyam was standing in front of the image doing Thakurji's darshan. Just then, the image of Thakurji seemed to come alive. It moved in its place, and then stepped down from the throne and came to meet Ghanshyam. Thakurji then took off the garland from his own neck and put it around Ghanshyam's neck. Then he went back and sat on his throne, and was quickly turned into the stone image that he was before. The priest saw this, Dharmadev saw this, and the devotees who had come for Thakurji's darshan also witnessed the miracle. Soon the news had spread in the whole village. By and by, the news reached King Guman Singh's ear, but the king wanted more evidence of Ghanshyam's divinity. So he sent a man to deliver an order that Dharmadev, with his 3 sons, should present himself at the king's court at 10 o'clock the next morning. Accordingly, Dharmadev with his 3 sons came to the court the next morning at the appointed hour. The king asked Dharmadev which of the 3 sons was Ghanshyam, the boy who had shown miraculous powers. Dharmadev put his hand on Ghanshyam's head and said, "This is my son Ghanshyam, who was honored by Thakurji yesterday." The king thought to himself, if this Ghanshyam is God incarnate, 2 tests will settle this issue. First, there is a point mentioned in the scriptures that God does not cast a shadow. Secondly, the scriptures also say that there are 16 signs or sacred marks on God's feet. So we can easily decide whether Ghanshyam is really God incarnate or not. If he is not, then surely there is a fraud or deception here. Thinking thus, the king called Dharmadev and Ghanshyam into an open compound where there was bright sunshine. Lo and behold, Dharmadev's body cast a shadow, but where Ghanshyam stood, no shadow fell and the king was bewildered. Then the king asked Ghanshyam to sit with his legs stretched out. Ghanshyam accordingly sat on the asana with his legs straightened out. There were on his instep of Ghanshyam's right foot 9 signs, namely Ashtakon, octagon, Urdhva Rekha, vertical line, swastik, 2 cross lines with ends turned in opposite directions, Jambu, drawing of a rose apple, Java, barley, Vajra, thunderbolt, Ankush, Chak, Ketu, flag, and Padma, lotus. The instep of his left foot had 7 other signs of divinity, namely Trikon, triangle, Kalash, water pot, Gopad, hoof of a cow, Dhanush, bow, Meen, fish, Ardha Chandra, half moon, and Vyoma, sky. Moreover, the Urdhva Rekha, or the vertical line, on both feet emerged from between the big toe and the one next to it and reached towards the ankle. The king was now convinced that Ghanshyam was really God incarnate. His joy at the discovery knew no bounds, as he had now seen God face to face. Both the king and the queen bowed to Ghanshyam and prostrated themselves before him. Then they ordered a beautiful bedstead with silk cushions and had Dharmadev and Ghanshyam seated on it. Then they worshipped the Father and the Son. They applied chandan and kumkum to their foreheads and offered flowers. They did arti to Ghanshyam and presented him with a velvet cap embroidered with gold threads and a pair of beautiful Indian trousers. Then they bade them farewell with great respect and went away rejoicing. On the 3rd day of their stay, Dharmadev and Bhaktimata left on a pilgrimage of other sacred places along with their 3 sons. In the course of their journey, they passed through Lucknow and Kanpur, and when the pilgrimage ended, they returned to Ayodhya. Icharam was the youngest of the 3 brothers. He had not yet learned how to walk with ease. So Vasantbai used to carry him in her arms, while Ghanshyam walked by his side holding his mother's hand. Once, on the way back home, Ghanshyam protested. He asked Bhaktimata, "Why do you always carry Icharam in your arms? Why not me?" Bhaktimata tried to explain to him, "Look, my son, Icharam is the youngest among all you brothers. He has not even learned how to walk yet, whereas you are old enough and you can walk easily. Besides, Icharam is not heavy, whereas you are." Ghanshyam still insisted, No, mother, you're wrong. I am not a heavy weight. Actually, Icharam is heavier than me. I am also very tired. Why not carry me for a change?" So saying, Ghanshyam, by using his supernatural powers, increased Icharam's weight to a degree where Vasantbai had to put Icharam down, and at the time she was puzzled. She remarked to Bhaktimata, "How heavy has Icharam suddenly become? He was not half so heavy even a moment ago." Bhaktimata smilingly replied, "It is all a creation of Ghanshyam's divine power. Since he does not want to walk, he made Icharam very heavy. Chandamasi, try carrying Ghanshyam in your arms for a while, then everything will be as before." Chandamasi accordingly lifted Ghanshyam in her arms and carried him. She did not feel that she was carrying a weight at all. And when Vasantbai carried Icharam again, she for her part discovered that his weight too had suddenly fallen to normal. Seeing such pranks indulged in by their son, Dharmadev and Bhaktimata began to
Ghanshyam
laugh.
stops the killing. Buldhidhar was the husband of Dharmadev's sister-in-law, Sadhubai. Buldhidhar and his brother, Murli Gangadhar, were both serving as sepoys in the army of the local king. Once, the king's army, in the course of a survey, came to Balampadhari village. Dharmadev thought that since Balampadhari was very near Ayodhya, he would go and see Bulidhar and Murli Gangadhar. So he started for Balampadhari, taking Ghanshyam and Rampratapai with him. The king's army had encamped in a garden on the outskirts of Balampadhari village. A watchman was seated at the entrance of the garden. Dharmadev told the watchman, "We want to see Buldhidhar and Murli Gangadhar. They are sepoys in the king's army. Kindly take us where they are." The watchman readily agreed. "Just follow me," he said. "I will show you where you can find them." He then took them to a peepal tree. There was a big tent near the peepal tree. The king was sitting in the tent with some of his men, and had just ordered the killing of some animals. Seeing the heartless slaughter going on inside the tent, Dharmadev was overwhelmed with anguish. Ghanshyam saw his father's grief-stricken face and inquired, "What has happened, father?" Dharmadev pointed to the door of the tent. When Ghanshyam looked inside, he saw animals being butchered. He felt a great pity for the animals. He took a vow then and there to put a stop to the killing. The moment he decided to do so, all the horses and elephants in the king's army rushed madly towards the tent. While some of the elephants began to uproot the tent with their trunks, others rushed inside. The whole village resounded with the noise and the clamor made by neighboring horses and trumpeting elephants. The sepoys in the tent ran for their lives. The king, who was sitting closely in the tent, bare-bodied, also ran away. When he saw a mad elephant enter the tent and charge at him, as he was running, his waistcloth got loosened. Somehow he held it in place with his hand, and hid behind the peepal tree. But the elephant gave chase, and ran after him towards the tree. Seeing the animal return to the attack, the king climbed up the tree to safety, and the elephant turned and went away. Now Ghanshyam, by his supernatural powers, entered into the peepal tree and shook it vigorously. All the branches began to shake, and the leaves too fell. The king in his perch at the top began to tremble. When he looked down, the whole earth seemed to him to be shaking under the tree. At once he felt repentant for his sins, and began to cry loudly. He prayed to God, "O God, please protect me." He was afraid that he would soon be thrown off the tree and get killed. When the king pleaded again, and more piteously, Ghanshyam, still seated inside the tree, spoke to him. "You and your army are committing grave sins. You are killing innocent animals. I am therefore very angry with you. If you want to live, take a vow here and now that you will never indulge in senseless killing again. Otherwise, you are doomed. The God to whom you are praying is actually standing over there just opposite this tree. If you have eyes, you can see. He will set you free at once, if you go and confess and repent for the sins you have committed." Hearing these words, the king felt very contrite. He knew he would have to obey, and so he vowed that from then on he would never kill any innocent animals or allow anybody else to do so. "O God," he said, "I take a solemn oath that henceforth I shall never order or allow any killing." Hearing the king's prayer, Ghanshyam felt compassion for him. He soon made the peepal tree stand up, strong and straight. All the elephants and horses then silently went back to their places in the sheds. The king slowly got down from the tree. Feeling humble, he fell on his knees before Ghanshyam and pleaded, "O Ghanshyam, you are God himself. Come down to earth. I am your humble slave. Please forgive my faults and sins. I shall never, never again permit any killing." When the king had spoken, Ghanshyam gave him his blessings. The king then bowed to Ghanshyam and Dharmadev and went back to his tent, a better man. Dharmadev also met his friends Baldidhar and Murli Gangadhar, and then returned to Ayodhya with Ghanshyam
The
and
Mahal
Rampada.
was saved. There was a very wealthy man named Baldevji who lived in Ayodhya. He owned a huge elephant, and there was a Mahout to look after the elephant. But the Mahout had no great affection for the animal. Every day he stole the best sweets from the food served to the elephant, and thus deprived the animal of some of its daily food. The elephant saw this happen day after day. Then one day it became furious. At noon that day, the Mahout had taken the elephant to the lake as usual for a bath. He made the elephant step into the water and began to wash its body with a tile. Deciding that the time had come to take revenge for the wrong done to it, the elephant lifted the Mahout with its trunk and held him high in the air with the intention of dashing him against the ground. All the people standing on the banks of the lake who saw this were horrified. Just then, Dharmadev was passing by with Ghanshyam. Ghanshyam saw the disaster that might befall the Mahout. He suddenly felt compassion for him, so he at once got down into the water, assumed a different body, and went up to the elephant. He then freed the Mahout from the elephant's trunk. Then he pacified the elephant, coaxed it out of the water by using gentle flattery, and rode on it himself. The elephant, now calmed down, walked like a humble cow. The people on the bank saw the miraculous transformation. They were all amazed at seeing Ghanshyam in two separate forms, two swarup of the same person. When the elephant came out of the water, the new Ghanshyam disappeared, while the old Ghanshyam continued to ride to the elephant house. There the Mahout ordered the elephant to bend down. When the elephant bent down obediently, Ghanshyam got off its back. The Mahout did obeisance to Ghanshyam with great devotion and said, "O Ghanshyam, had you not quieted the elephant and saved me from its wrath today, I would have surely died. Your God himself come to earth. I shall not henceforth steal anyone else's food." Ghanshyam thereupon blessed the
Chapter
Mahout
29.
and returned
A new
home.
set of teeth. One day, Ghanshyam told Suhasini Bhabi, "Bhabi, my molar teeth are giving me severe pain. I cannot chew chapatis. Will you please prepare sira for me instead?" Suhasini Bhabi agreed. Sira was soon ready, and Suhasini Bhabi called all the members of the family to dinner. She served chapatis to Dharmadev, Rampratapai, and Icharam, while to Ghanshyam she served the soft sira. Ghanshyam gave some sira to his younger brother Icharam. Ghanshyam took just 1 or 2 morsels of sira. Then, leaving the rest on the plate, he washed his hands and went away. Seeing this, Suhasini Bhabi called him out in the courtyard behind the kitchen and inquired, "Does your molar tooth give you much trouble, dear child?" Ghanshyam replied, "Yes, Bhabi. It is very painful. It is also loose. Why not pull out all the teeth that are loose? That will relieve me of my pain." So saying, he opened his mouth, and with his divine powers loosened all his teeth. Suhasini Bhabi put her finger into his mouth to pull out the molar tooth, which was shaky. Quickly she got it out. Then Ghanshyam said to her, "Bhabi, there is another tooth which is also loose and gives me a lot of pain. Please pull it out too." Thus, one by one, Ghanshyam had all his teeth removed, and before his Bhabi knew what was happening, she saw the toothless mouth of Ghanshyam and at once became worried. She called out to Bhaktimata, and pointing to Ghanshyam's mouth, she told her, "Mother, Ghanshyam complained to me that he had a bad toothache, and that one molar was loose. But when I felt the teeth, they all came loose, one after another, and I had to pull them all out. Now how will he eat?" Bhaktimata saw the heap of fallen teeth, and she too started to worry. She then asked Ghanshyam to open his mouth, and when he did so, both she and Suhasini Bhabi were stunned at what they saw. Ghanshyam had already a new set of teeth in his mouth. Their astonishment as well as their joy knew no bounds. They then saw Ghanshyam pick up the teeth lying on the ground. Suhasini Babi made him open his mouth, and what did she see? There were pearls instead of teeth in his hand, and as Ghanshyam lifted his hand, a flock of swans from Mahasarovar swooped down from the sky. One by one, they picked up the pearls from Ghanshyam's hand and flew away. Seeing this wonderful exhibition of the powers of the child, Bhaktimata and Suhasini Bhabi realized once more that Ghanshyam was indeed God incarnate, and so they humbly bowed and said a prayer
A
to him.
feast for his friends. Once in Chapaya, Ghanshyam took his friends out to play in the forest on the bank of Mean Lake. They were so engrossed in their game that they did not know it was already 4 o'clock in the evening. Madhav, Veni, Praj, Sukhanand were all hungry. They began to think of hurrying home to take the meal. Ghanshyam was, of course, aware of what was going in their minds, so he asked them, "Do you all feel very hungry?" All of them replied, "Yes, very hungry." Then Ghanshyam proposed, "If you do as I ask you to do, I shall provide plenty of food for all of you to eat here." The friends readily agreed, "Oh yes, we are prepared to do whatever you ask us to do, but you will have to give us enough food." Ghanshyam then asserted, "If you agree to play with me till sunset, in the evening I shall certainly find you all the food you need." The friends agreed, one and all. Ghanshyam then took out his handkerchief and tied it to the branch of the mango tree nearby, and told his friends, "Come on, let us go to Mean Lake for a bath. This handkerchief of mine will be filled with sweets by the time we come back." All of them then went to Mean Lake for the bath. They played in the water for a long time. At last Ghanshyam called them out, "Come friends, come out of the water fast, or my elder brother will reapproach me if we are late." So all of them came out of the water, dried their bodies, and put on their clothes. Then Veniram reminded Ghanshyam of his promise. "Ghanshyam, do you remember that you said you would feed us all here? Let us have the sweets. We are very hungry." Ghanshyam replied, "Oh sure, come, let us climb the mango tree. You will have plenty of things to eat there." So all of them ran up to the mango tree, and one by one they climbed up. Ghanshyam made for the branch to which he had tied his handkerchief and had a look. Then he began to take out many delicious sweets from out of the handkerchief and gave them to his friends. All his friends wondered how and from where the sweets came. Ghanshyam could read what was passing through their minds. To show them his divine power, he issued an order as though to invisible things. In a split second, 8 young women descended from the sky with plates in their hands. They were the 8 Siddhis. Each one had a gold plate in one hand, in which there were 32 varieties of sweets. In their other hand, there was a gold water pot. It was full of cool water to drink. Ghanshyam made all his friends get down from the tree and sit in a circle. The 8 Siddhis then began to serve the delicious food to them, singing praises of Ghanshyam. All the boys ate to their heart's content and drank the cool water. When they had finished eating, the Siddhis, one by one, bowed to Ghanshyam and disappeared in the sky. By then, the sun had set. All the children returned home,
Chapter
dancing and
31.
singing with joy.
Thousands are fed. Once, a band of touring sannyasis touring the country came to Chapaya and encamped on the bank of a pond called Kampa. The party consisted of 1,000 bhavas and sadhus. Some of them had matted hair. Some others had only a tuft of hair on their heads. Yet others had long beards, while some had shaven heads. Some of the sannyasis carried tongs in their hands. Some others had spears. There were some who had swords, while others had long sticks or daggers. When the band had settled down near the pond, drums were beaten, conchs were blown, and high-pitched notes issued from pipes, which filled the air with music. Hundreds of tents had been set up. Soon the bhavas went away to have a bath in the pond. Ghanshyam, taking his friends Vani, Madhav, Prag, and some others with him, went to have a look at the bhavas. After finishing their bath, 5 leading bhavas proceeded to Chapaya village to find provisions for the lot. Meanwhile, the head man of the village, Motibai Tarwadi, fearing that it would not be possible to collect enough provisions for so many Babas, had run away to another village. The Babas came to the village and inquired, "Who is Dharmadev here?" The villagers directed them to Dharmadev's house. When they reached Dharmadev's house, they made a loud clatter with their tongues and spoke arrogantly, "We are a band of 1,000 Babas. We have camped on the bank of Kampa Pond. We want grain and vegetables for cooking our food." Dharmadev, on hearing their demand, replied politely, "Listen, I do not have cereals, ghee, and other provisions in my house, which are sufficient to feed 1,000 Babas. If you like, I can give you enough for about 100. Almost all our food stocks in the house are exhausted, so please take what I can give you and collect the rest from the village." But the Babas would not listen. They struck their tongues harder and more angrily and declared, "No, no, we will not go to anybody else. You are the richest person in this village. We will find all our requirements here. Don't tell lies. Give us what we want." The men would not budge. Listening to all this, Dharmadev was greatly worried. He did not know what to do. When Ghanshyam came to know of the situation, he immediately came home and asked his father, "What has happened, father? Why are you upset?" Dharmadev told him about the Babas. Ghanshyam reassured his father at once. "Don't worry at all, father. Let us start getting out what we have. I am sure we have enough stocks." So they opened their jars, and Suhasini Babi put her hands in and began to draw cereals, flour, molasses, ghee, etc., from out of the jars. The more she took, the more there was. They never reached the bottom. In a short time, they had piled up a huge heap of various kinds of provisions. The Babas were overjoyed and began to praise Dharmadev. As they had obtained more than what was sufficient for 1,000 people, they gave him their blessings and went away. Dharmadev was left wondering, from where did such a large quantity of supplies arrive? Then, fearing that not a single grain would now be left in the house, he looked into the jars and the baskets with some anxiety, but to his joy and surprise he found that all the jars were as full as ever. It was as if not even a handful had been taken away. He knew at once that this was yet another of Ghanshyam's miracle. In the evening, Ghanshyam, with his father, went to see the Baba's camp on the banks of Kampa Pond. Going around the place, they came to a small tent. There, inside the tent, a Baba was sitting on a tiger skin. He looked a very ill-tempered and arrogant man. He entered at once into a heated discussion with Dharmadev. When he was clearly defeated in the discussion, he began to hurl abuses. Ghanshyam thought that this Baba should be taught a lesson. He told his father, "Father, I want that tiger skin on which the Baba is sitting." Hearing this, the Baba shouted, "What insolence! What is this kid talking about?" Dharmadev tried to explain as softly as he could, "This is my son Ghanshyam. He wants that tiger skin." The Baba blared out angrily, "What nonsense! Do you have the money to buy it? It will cost you no less than 300 rupees. Hearing this, Ghanshyam thought, a true Baba who has renounced everything would never be arrogant. He should never lose his temper. He should not possess or covet money. He should know better than that. We will see. The moment he said this to himself, a real tiger sprang up from the tiger skin and seemed as if he was about to devour the Baba. The Baba ran out shouting for help. "Oh God, I am finished! I am finished! Run, all of you! Run for your lives! There is a tiger in there!" Hearing his cries, the other Babas scattered in all directions, being frightened to death. They forgot their arms, their water pots, their wooden sandals. They fled, leaving everything behind. There was panic and shouting all through the camp. When the commotion subsided, Ghanshyam called the tiger to him and patted it on the back and quieted it. Thereafter, He called at the Bawas and told them, "Don't be afraid. The tiger will not hurt anyone." We materialized this tiger just to humble an arrogant Bawa. Hearing Ghanshyam's assurance, the Bawas came back, though they had not shed all their fear. The Bawa who had provoked the incident was still trembling all over. All of them prostrated before Ghanshyam and asked to be forgiven. "We have sinned through arrogance," they said. "You are God himself. We insulted you and your father. Please have mercy on us." Ghanshyam thereupon forgave them. He ordered the tiger to go away, and it disappeared at once into the jungle. After some time, Dharmadev and Ghanshyam returned to the village, and the Bhavas folded up their tents, took their belongings, and went on their way to Ayodhya.
Lakshmibai sees a miracle. In Chapriya, Ghanshyam would often go along with his friends to one of his neighbors' houses to have a little fun at the man's expense. The boys would enter the house secretly, take off the earthen pot from the hanger tied to the ceiling, and enjoy a feast of milk, curd, butter, or whatever else was found in the pot. One day, Ghanshyam accompanied his friend Veniram to his house. Veniram's mother was called Lakshmibai. When they got to Veniram's house, they saw Lakshmibai sitting outside in the courtyard, hard at work separating chaff from the grain. Ghanshyam and Veniram played around for some time, and then silently entered the house. Then they slipped into the kitchen. There they took butter from a pot, mixed sugar with the butter, and began to eat the mixture with relish. Suddenly, Lakshmibai came into the kitchen and saw them eating the sweetened butter. Seeing Lakshmibai, Ghanshyam and Veniram jumped out of the window and fled from the room. Lakshmibai was furious. She at once went to Bhaktimata's house and complained to her, "Mother, your Ghanshyam comes daily to our house and steals whatever sweets I have made. He enters the house silently, goes into the kitchen and eats ghee, milk, curd, butter. Besides, he spoils my son by teaching him how to steal. I saw it all with my own eyes today. Why don't you teach your son better manners?" Bhaktimata quickly replied, "No, my dear, my Ghanshyam would never steal anything. He's a very well-behaved boy. On the other hand, your Veni very often comes to my house and eats whatever he can lay his hands on when no one is looking. At times, he even carries a few things away from my house. Still, we do not complain. I cannot believe what you say of my Ghanshyam. If you see Ghanshyam stealing next time, catch him, tie his hands and feet, and call me. I shall believe what you say if you catch him red-handed." "All right," said Lakshmibai, fully satisfied with the answer. "You will see for yourself. I do not tell lies. If Ghanshyam comes to my house again, I shall tie his hands and feet and let you know. I shall prove to the whole village that Ghanshyam is a thief and not the good boy people think." Saying this, she went away to her own house. When Ghanshyam heard about this, he thought that something should be done to silence this woman who carried tales to his mother. One afternoon, Ghanshyam, along with Veniram, entered the latter's house by the back door. They saw that Lakshmibai was having a nap. This was a good opportunity. They went straight to the kitchen, took the earthen pot hanging from this roof, and ate all the curd in it. Unfortunately for the boys, Lakshmibai woke up at that exact moment. She heard some rattling noise in the kitchen. Thinking that it might be a cat, she hurried to the kitchen. There, she saw curd stuck to the lips of Ghanshyam and Veniram, and the pot which they had emptied. She let her son Veniram escape, but caught hold of Ghanshyam. "Now you will see," said Lakshmibai in a triumphant voice. "I have caught a hold of you in the very act of stealing. I shall let the whole village know that the butter thief has been caught at last." Lakshmibai fastened Ghanshyam's hand and feet tightly with a cord. Flushed with victory, she shouted to everyone she met, "Come and see, I have caught the thief." She then went to Bhaktimata and told her how she had at last caught Ghanshyam. "Today I have caught the thief and tied his hands and feet. Every day he comes to my house and steals and eats all the good things in the kitchen. Come, I will show you how honest and truthful your son is." She then took Bhaktimata and all the neighbors to her house. Since Lakshmibai was away, Ghanshyam thought that this was a chance to escape. He used his divine powers to free himself from the ropes which tied him. Then with the same rope, he bound Veniram's hands and feet. He then slipped out and reached home by a different route. Soon Lakshmi Bai came to her house, bringing all the neighbors along. Little did she suspect about the transformation that had taken place. She opened the door of the kitchen and declared without looking, "Look at Ghanshyam, the thief." But what Bhakti Mata and the others saw was Veniram who was bound to the ropes and not Ghanshyam. All the neighbors began to laugh and said, "What a fool this woman is. She tied up her own son, Veniram, and tells the whole world he is a thief." Hearing the laughter, Lakshmi Bai turned around and saw Veniram, her own son, was bound with ropes. She was shocked at the sight that met her eyes and felt terribly embarrassed. By this time, Ghanshyam, with molasses in his hands and his mouth, came to Lakshmi Bai's house as if on a casual visit. With a mischievous glint in his eyes, he inquired, "What has happened, mother?" Bhakti Mata took him aside and began to laugh at the spectacle. All the neighbors too went back, chuckling themselves over Lakshmi Bai's loss of face. When she was alone, Lakshmi Bai began to wonder about this episode. She had no doubts that it was Ghanshyam whom she had caught and whose hands and feet were bound. How then can one explain the transformation? Only a miracle can explain it. Ghanshyam must be a god-child. By now she had freed Veniram. When Lakshmi Bai saw the truth, she went to Bhakti Mata. She begged for forgiveness for her ignorance in thinking
Chapter
that
33.
Ghanshyam was
The importance of
just a fool.
Ekadashi. It was the day of Ekadashi, the 11th day of every fortnight. Ghanshyam got up very early, washed his mouth, took his bath, and after prayers and after worship of the deity, went for darshan to the temple of Hanuman Gadi. Mohandas, the Mahant priest of the temple, was engaged in telling the story of the Ram Charit. In the course of the story, the narrator had to explain the benefits of observing Ekadashi. He said, "If we observe one Ekadashi, we shall obtain the grace of God equal to performing 1,000 Ashwamedh sacrifices." Hearing this, Ghanshyam asked the Mahant, if that was so, why was it that there were so many people who did not observe Ekadashi? Mohandas gave a very long explanation. God has given us this very precious human body, which souls acquire only after innumerable births. Why then should we inflict suffering on it by fasting on Ekadashi? This body is not meant for suffering hardship. Since the day of observance of Ekadashi was given up in Jagannath Puri, no one has observed it. It is our duty to preserve and nourish our body, to keep it fit. For this we should eat and drink to our heart's content. Today, only those observe Ekadashi who do not have anything to eat or drink. So, little boy, bear this in mind. Never make your body suffer, which you do if you fast even on Ekadashi. Ghanshyam thought within him, "This Mahant is misleading the people by spreading false beliefs. I must enlighten him so that he shows the people the right path to salvation." So he said to the Mahant, "Mahantji, are you not putting wrong ideas into people's minds? It is a sin to go against the scriptures. Observance of Ekadashi brings great benefit, if you know its full meaning. One should tell the people what Ekadashi really means." The Mahant was annoyed beyond words. "You, little one, you have the audacity to teach me my duty? Are you not ashamed of yourself?" he bellowed. In reply, Ghanshyam simply fixed his eyes steadily on the Mahant. The Mahant immediately went into a trance. In that state of mind, he found himself transported to Yampuri, the city of the god of death. There he felt that he was being beaten severely by servants of Yam. He heard them scolding him. "You have never observed Ekadashi. You have fattened yourself by eating and drinking merrily. What is worse, you have abused your position by misguiding other people who are in your charge. You have to suffer for your sins." He felt that after rebuking him, they fell on him once more and thrashed him even more soundly. In the temple, the body of the Mahant began to toss this way and that way, as if it was writhing in pain, and he shouted, "Save me! Save me! Yam's men are beating me. They are punishing me because I did not observe Ekadashi." It looked as if the Mahant's bones had been broken by the heavy beating. After a while, the trance came to an end. As soon as the Mahant woke up from the trance, he prostrated himself before the feet of Ghanshyam. The Mahant was now a new and better man. He addressed the people in an enlightened mood. "Listen, my friends, this Ghanshyam is not the little boy that he looks. He is God Supreme. But out of my blindness I ignored him. I could not understand him. I had therefore to suffer in Yampuri. My bones and ribs are still aching. I was punished because I did not observe Ekadashi all these years. I therefore swear today before Ghanshyam that I shall from now regularly observe Ekadashi in the proper way, and ask the people to do the same. And you too, friends, should begin observing Ekadashi from this very day." Having said this, the Mahant again fell at the feet of Ghanshyam, then seated himself in his own chair of authority, and worshipped him, and begged to be forgiven for his sin. All those present at the time also bowed to Ghanshyam, and went home with the resolution that they would spend their Ekadash in fasting and prayer. Ghanshyam then gave the Mahant his blessings in return.
Ghanshyam is given the sacred thread. Ghanshyam was now 7 years old. Bhakti-mata thought it was time to give him the sacred thread. So she sent for a Brahmin named Hari Krishna Upadhyaya. Hari Krishna was the only priest in the whole village. He was a very pure and simple Brahmin. When he received the call, he at once put on his turban, wound the case around his neck, and bound the astrology and went to Dharmadev's house. Dharmadev received him with due respect and gave him an asan to sit on. He then said to the Brahmin, "We want to give the sacred thread to our son Ghanshyam. Will you please fix an auspicious day for the ceremony?" Hari Krishna Upadhyaya put on his spectacles, arranged his case comfortably, and then, opening a book, began to count on his fingers. After making his calculations, he declared Monday, the 10th of the bright half of Fagun, somewhat 1945, to be an auspicious day for the thread-giving ceremony. Accordingly, Dharmadev began his preparations for the sacred ceremony. He sent out invitations to all relatives, sadhus and brahmins in and around the place. He got the whole of Brata street of Ayodhya tastefully decorated, the house painted anew, and pictures of birds and deers and other animals drawn up on the walls. A large mandap was set up beneath the neem tree outside the house. Beautiful patterns and colored powder were drawn on the floor, rangoli. A colorful tree of glass was constructed and planted in the middle of the mandap, and a lamp placed in the center of the tree. Mirrors were hung around the tree reflecting lights. Glass lamps and chandeliers of different shapes and sizes were fixed all around, which together shed a flood of light that dazzled the eyes of spectators. Clothes of different colors and arches of asopalao leaves were an added attraction to the mandap. Everyone who saw the mandap was wonderstruck with its glittering splendor. From the early morning of the 10th day of the bright half of Fagun, Dharmadev's house resounded with melodious tunes of the shahanai, pipe. Women began to sing devotional songs. Hari Krishna Upadhyaya, the priest, along with other Brahmins, began to chant the sacred mantras which were offered in the sacrificial fire, which was kept alight with the help of ghee, barley, sesame, etc. The priest made Ghanshyam take a vow before the fire god. Then Rambali the barber was called, and Ghanshyam had his head shaved. He was then made to take a bath and put on a yellow silk garment, pitambar. Ghanshyam walked up the sacrificial mandap, bowed his head to his parents, and offered oblations. By then, news had reached heaven, and Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh, and the other gods had descended from the sky to have his darshan. Flowers were showered from the sky. Ghanshyam then received the Guru mantra, put on the celibate's clothes and the waistband, and held a blade of moon's grass in his hand. He also had a stick from the palash tree and a begging bowl in his hands. He then asked for alms from his mother and made over what he had received to the priest. It was noon by this time. Ghanshyam was made to wear the sacred thread. In the afternoon, he put on the clothes of a young boy, Batuk, and went to the village square for a ceremonial run. Ghanshyam and his maternal uncle, Vashram Bhai, stood in front. Behind them stood Dharmadev and other relatives. And last of all, the ladies who sang religious songs. All stood in the square facing north. All of them believed that when the boy ran, his maternal uncle would quickly catch him and bring him back. But Ghanshyam had other thoughts. Mighty thoughts they were. I have to do good to innumerable souls in this world. I shall therefore run so fast that I can reach the Himalayas almost instantaneously. My maternal uncle will never be able to catch up with me. Then Coming back from the Himalayas, I shall travel from place to place and work for the deliverance of my people. With these unsuspected thoughts in his mind, Ghanshyam started to run, followed by his maternal uncle. The uncle ran, and ran very fast, but however fast he might run, it was impossible to catch Ghanshyam. At last, the uncle felt exhausted. He praised Ghanshyam's prowess as a runner, but at the same time prayed to him, "Oh Ghanshyam, please come into my arms. Come back and help me maintain an uncle's honor. Your parents will suffer greatly if you go away." Hearing his uncle's prayer, Ghanshyam seemed to change his mind. "My parents are pure and innocent. I don't want them to suffer on my account. I will not therefore leave them and go away." He so returned. Vashrambai was overjoyed to see him come back. He lifted him and seated him on his shoulders and brought him back to the mandap to everyone's relief. He then gave 5 rupees to Ghanshyam, which Ghanshyam handed over to his father. Ghanshyam then bowed to all. Finally, sitting by the side of his mother, he ate his meal consisting of ghee, molasses and rice. It was the last ritual of the day. Dharmadev fed the Brahmins and sadhus and presented them with clothes, money and dakshina, and bade
Chapter
them
35.
a warm farewell.
Ghanshyam is seen as Sri Ramchandra. At noon, one day, Ghanshyam took his friends to Mean Lake in Chapaya village for a bath. All the boys jumped into the water at once for a swim. Ghanshyam proposed that they should play in the water by trying to catch one another. So the game began, and many were caught by their pursuers. But it turned out that no one could catch Ghanshyam, try as they might. He swam very fast, dived deep into the water, and reappeared far away. After playing in this way for some time, Ghanshyam dived to the bottom and sat on the bed of the lake. He did not come up for some time. His friends began to worry. They wondered where Ghanshyam could be. Had he drowned, or had he been swallowed by a crocodile? At that time, a washerman named Mancha was washing clothes on the bank of the lake. Ghanshyam's friends ran to him for help. "Our friend Ghanshyam has disappeared in the lake. We cannot find him. We were all swimming and playing together. After his last dive in the water, he did not come up at all. Either he had drowned or a crocodile had eaten him. Will you dive into the water and find out what has happened to him?" The washerman plunged into the water, dived deep, and carried out a wide search on all sides, but he could find no trace of Ghanshyam. At last, completely exhausted, the washerman came up to the surface and asked the boys to run to the village and bring Ghanshyam's father quickly to the lake. One of the boys ran to Dharmadev's house and told him of the story. Dharmadev was greatly upset at the news. He took Bhaktimata, Rampratap, and Vashrambai and other villagers with him to the Mean Lake without delay. They got to the place, but were at their wits' ends as to what to do, and worried all the more because they were helpless. Deep down in the water, Ghanshyam knew that his parents were worrying about him. He therefore decided that he should come out of the water and show everyone he was quite safe. He then came up to the surface so that all could see. His father, mother, and all the rest felt relieved at the sight of the boy. Their faces shone with joy and gratitude. Thereafter, Ghanshyam stood up on the water and started walking towards the shore without touching the surface. The people looking out from the land had a vision not of Ghanshyam but Lord Ramchandra. They were astonished beyond belief at this new transformation. When he landed on the shore, however, Ghanshyam was his former self again. He bowed to his father and mother and said, "Why were you so worried? I was only sitting at the bottom of the lake to do some work of my own." Bhaktimat embraced Ghanshyam, and all of them walked back happily to
Sitting
the
on stone slabs. Soon it was the month of Chaitra. Dharmadev accompanied Rampratap, Icharam, Suwasi Bhabi, Bhaktimata, Ghanshyam, and other villagers left for Ayodhya. On the way was the river Saryu. The river was very wide as well as very deep. One had to go by boat to cross the river, but only one boat was available, and it could only take a few passengers at a time, while the riverbank was crowded with people waiting to cross. Ghanshyam told the boatman, "We want a boat all to ourselves. Can you provide one?" The boatman replied, "You will have to pay more if you want to reserve a whole boat." Ghanshyam replied with emphasis, "I am afraid we cannot afford to pay more than the normal fare. If you will not take us, we will find other ways of crossing the river." Ghanshyam then turned aside and asked Dharmadev and others of his party to follow him. Ghanshyam took them to a place a short distance away, where there were some large stone slabs. He asked his mother, father, Suhasini Bhabi, Icharam, and other villagers from Chapariya to sit on one of the bigger slabs, while he and Rampratap Bhai sat on a smaller one. Then, as he touched both the slabs with his right hand, they began to move over the water just like a real boat. People standing on the bank and the boatmen were all bewildered at the strange sight of stone slabs sailing on water like proper boats. All were convinced that the little boy could be none other than Lord Ramchandra himself. They bowed to Ghanshyam from the river bank. The two stone slabs soon reached the opposite side. There they got down, and led by Ghanshyam.
Chapter 37. Miracle shown to aunts. Once in Chapaya, Bhakti Mata's sisters, Vasantbai and Chandanbai, came to stay with her. Vasantbai brought her son Manik there along with her, and Chandanbai brought her son Vasti too. As soon as they arrived, they asked, "Where is Ghanshyam?" They were very anxious to see him. Bhakti Mata replied, "He has gone to Pirojpur, but he will be back soon." That same evening, Ghanshyam and Icharam returned home along with Dharmadev. The aunts gave Ghanshyam and Icharam sugar cakes, or patasa, which they had specially brought for them. Early next morning, Chandan Masi and Vasant Masi began to grind corn into flour on the stone grinder. Chandan Masi thought that since it was early morning, it would be proper to sing morning bhajans, Prabhatya. So while grinding, she began to sing one of Tulsi Das's morning bhajans. As she sang the first line of the bhajan, "Get up, my darling, it is already morning. Utho lal, Prabhat bhai hai." Ghanshyam, who was sleeping in a nearby bed, spoke up, "Masi Ba, I am fully awake. Why do you ask me to get up? What do you want?" On hearing this, the aunt said, "We are not asking you to get up, we are waking up our Lord." Thereupon, Ghanshyam, while still lying in his bed, stretched out his hand, pressed it against the handle of the grinder. The grinder came to a sudden halt. The aunts tried hard to turn it, but it would not move. The aunts were perplexed. Ghanshyam then suggested to them, "Masi, just say the same lines again. The God whom you are asking to wake up from his sleep is the same as the one who has placed his hand on the grinder." But the word seemed so silly that the aunts did not pay any heed to what he said. Instead, they tried harder to remove Ghanshyam's hand from the handle of the grinder, but to no avail. The hand would not move even by a hair's breadth. Meanwhile, Bhakti Mata, with a lighted lamp in her hand, entered the room. Both the aunts began to complain. "Sister, please ask Ghanshyam to take his hand off the grinder. We are not able to remove his hand, and he won't take it off." Bhakti Mata turned to her son and asked him to take off his hand. When Ghanshyam found that the mother had joined the aunts in urging him to release the handle, he said, "Mother, please ask the aunts whom they were trying to wake up. When I told them that the God they addressed was the same as I, they would not believe me." The aunts relented, and to pacify Ghanshyam, they said, all right, my dear child. The words of the song were meant for you. You are God, are you not? Come now, and allow us to carry on with our work." Ghanshyam explained, "Had you said the truth in the very beginning, the grinder would not have stopped, and their work would not have been delayed." The aunts replied, "We were ignorant. Our eyes were opened only just now, when you showed us your divine power. You indeed are God incarnate. We seek our forgiveness for mocking you." So saying, they bowed to Ghanshyam as they would bow to God.
Ghanshyam eats up all the food. After arriving from Ayodhya, the festival of Ram Navami was not too far off. Dharmadev decided to celebrate the festival in his own house with the usual fanfare. He sent out invitations to his friends and relatives on the occasion. Many of his friends and relatives from the surrounding villages gladly responded to his call and came a day earlier. The next day was Ram Navami, and they celebrated it with great religious fervor. Storytelling, prayers, and the singing of devotional songs continued throughout the day. On the third day of the festival, Bhakti Mata and Suhasini Bhabi got up early in the morning and cooked the food for the whole family, as they were all breaking their fast that day. Ghanshyam too got up along with his mother and finished all his morning rituals in time for his meal. When the food was ready, Bhakti Mata placed a large plate full of dainty dishes at the feet of Thakurji, the deity, as an offering to him. On seeing this, Ghanshyam told his mother that he too was feeling very hungry. The mother took a little from each delicacies from the large plate, put it in a smaller one, and gave it to Ghanshyam. Within minutes, Ghanshyam emptied his plate. Then he began eating from a larger plate meant for Thakurji, and soon ate everything. He thus emptied all the plates, drank some water, and quietly slipped out of the kitchen. When Bhakti Mata returned to the kitchen, She found out to her horror that all the food had disappeared and all the plates were empty. Rushing out of the kitchen, she begged Dharmadev, "Please hurry to the market and bring pulses, rice, flour, vegetables, ghee, molasses, everything, for Ghanshyam has eaten up all the food prepared for our guests. He has emptied all the plates and I shall have to cook a meal all over again. So please bring the necessary provisions without delay. Otherwise, we won't be able to feed the guests." When Ghanshyam heard of this, he said, "Mother dear, you're mistaken. All the food is there just as it was. I have not taken anything from it. Come, I will show you." But Bhakti Mata insisted that Swasni Bhabi and herself had just been inside and had seen everything, and she repeated, "The plates are empty." Ghanshyam was no less insistent. "No, no, mother, you're wrong. Just come in with me and have a look." So saying, he pulled Bhakti Mata by the hand and led her to the kitchen. Lo and behold, another miracle. Bhakti Mata saw, as Ghanshyam had assured her, that all the plates were full as ever. Seeing such a miracle, all she could do was embrace her son and cuddle him with great affection. Dharmadev was also very happy when he heard the story. When the guests came,
Chapter 39,
he fed them
In Search of
generously.
Gauri the Cow. Dharmadev kept a number of cows. One of them was named Gomti, and she was very dear to Ghanshyam. Gomti had 2 heifers, Gauri and Kapila. Every morning, the cowherd took Dharmadev's cows for grazing. He grazed them all day long and brought them home in the evening. One day, however, on coming home, he found that all the cows had returned except for Gauri. Deeply worried, the cowherd rushed back to the grazing field and searched everywhere, but could find no trace of Gauri. He then came back very downcast and informed Dharmadev about it. The sun had already set. Dharmadev, along with Rampratap and Ghanshyam, went out in search of Gauri with a heavy heart. They searched all the surrounding fields, but Gauri could not be found. They even went into the jungle, which was a short distance from the field, in the hope of finding her there. By now night had descended, but the soft light from a full moon brightened the scene around. The 3 of them searched every part of the jungle, but none could find any trace of Gauri. In a last desperate attempt, Ghanshyam and Rampratap called out Gauri's name several times. To their delight, it succeeded, for almost immediately Gauri appeared from out of the thick bush and came running and mooing to its masters. They were all greatly relieved to find Gauri, whom they had all given up for lost, and Ghanshyam affectionately patted her on the head. Thereafter, taking Gauri with them, they began their weary journey back through the jungle. After they had walked for some time, Dharmadev suddenly stopped. "Why did you stop, father?" inquired Ghanshyam. Dharmadev pointed to a spot ahead. Ghanshyam saw that there was a tiger there, under a tree just across the way. The tiger's eyes shone, and he was yawning. The tiger soon smelt human flesh, and so got up and growled. Dharmadev, Rampratapa, and Gauri shook with fear at the sight. Dharmadev thought that all 4 of them would be killed. The tiger would swallow them up. But in the meantime, Ghanshyam ran up to the tiger, stood in front of him, and looked steadily into his eyes. At once, the tiger calmed down, bent his head as if in homage, went around Ghanshyam once or twice, and lay there again quietly. Ghanshyam then turned to his father and cheered him up. "Do not be afraid, father," he said. To the others he said, "Follow me, all of you. The tiger will not do you any harm. He is sleeping soundly." Accordingly, Dharmadev and Rampratap, along with Gauri, followed close behind Ghanshyam, and passed nervously by the sleeping tiger. In a short while, they all emerged from the jungle, and reached a neighboring village. After staying there for the night with a man called Oza, they all returned home with Gauri the next day. Seeing Gauri safely back, and hearing the story about Ghanshyam's encounter with the tiger,
Chapter 40,
Bhakti Mata was overjoyed.
Walking on Water. One afternoon in Chapayak, Ghanshyam, accompanied by his younger brother Itcharam and his friends, went to a place on the outskirts of the village. There they all had a bath in the lake Mean and began to play a chase and catch game under a banyan tree there. The games went on till evening when, suddenly, it began to rain. At first they thought that the rain would stop after a short time and that they would return home soon. However, it rained heavily and continuously. Darkness spread all around. Thunder and lightning rent the sky. Icharam and the other smaller kids of his age began to cry. The river was swelling rapidly. Within a short time, the whole of the surrounding area was inundated. There was water everywhere. The older boys, Vinny, Madhav, and Prag, were also now worried about how they would reach home. Frightened, Icharam asked Ghanshyam, "What will happen now? How can we go home? Will I not be drowned if I try to walk through the water?" Ghanshyam told Icharam and the others not to worry. "Don't be afraid. Come on, let us get down from the tree, and then all of you follow me. Icharam should walk behind me holding on to my dhoti. The others should follow similarly, one behind the other, holding on to one another's dhotis from behind. We shall walk on the water, and even the rain will not fall on us." Saying so, Ghanshyam got down from the tree. First, he took Icharam behind him. Then followed Veni, Madhav, and Prag. Thus holding on to one another's dhotis, they all walked behind Ghanshyam. When they came to the water's edge, they found that they had been lifted above the ground by some unknown power, and so they walked across the water without even getting their feet wet. Rain fell on all sides, but it did not touch them, and so they crossed the river and reached the outskirts of the village. Dharmadev, Bhakti Mata, and the parents of the other boys were all out searching for them. Suddenly, when the men looked in the direction of the river, they saw the boys walking on water. There was a brilliant light emanating from Ghanshyam's body. At first, they were astonished. Then they realized once more that Ghanshyam was God himself, and that there should be no surprise at the miracle. And they bowed, as they did whenever Ghanshyam showed his
Chapter
divine
41.
powers.
A Cannon of Gold. Ghanshyam's elder brother, Ram Pratap Bhai, was now the commander-in-chief of the army of Rai Darshan Singh, the king of Ayodhya. Once, the king told him, "In our armory near Makoda Ghat, there is a big cannon made of gold. Please bring it in a cart and put it up in our palace." Ram Pratap Bhai accordingly went to Makoda Ghat, taking with him a big enough cart and 25 soldiers. Ghanshyam too went along with them to have a look at the golden cannon. The golden cannon was very big and very heavy. The cart, with 4 bullocks tied to it, was kept ready near the entrance of the armory. The soldiers opened the door and tried to haul the cannon by the means of ropes, but the cannon would not move. It did not move even when 25 soldiers tried to pull or push it. Ram Pratap also joined the other soldiers in an effort to pull it, but to no avail. The soldiers expressed their concern to Ram Pratap Bhai, saying, "Your Excellency, this cannon appears to be fixed to its place. We cannot move it, even by a hair's breadth. How then can we lift it and put it on this cart? We have tried our best, but failed, and are now quite exhausted. It is already noon. The king will punish us all if we are not able to carry it to the palace by this evening." Ram Pratap Bhai was also worried. Ghanshyam was standing there, watching the men's agony. He then asked his elder brother, "Should I move the cannon and put it on the cart, brother?" Then, without waiting for a reply, Ghanshyam at once asked all the soldiers to stand aside. "Please do not worry," he said. "I can alone, by myself, carry the cannon and put it on the cart." A couple of the soldiers laughed at the idea. They said among themselves, "This kid talks big, the boaster. How can he carry such a heavy cannon when we, 25 of us, could not even move it from its place?" While they were thus laughing, Ghanshyam had already gone up to the cannon, and within a fraction of a second lifted it from its place without effort, carried it outside, and placed it on its cart. With all those present there, Ghanshyam seemed, for the time being, like the very image of Lord Ramchandra, and not the little kid they had known. They remembered an incident from Ramchandra's life. Just as Ram lifted Shiv's bow and broke it, they said, when nobody else could so much as lift it, this little child, Ghanshyam, by himself, lifted this big cannon and placed it on the cart, when it could not be shifted by anyone else. This child, therefore, must be God himself. When they saw this, they felt humble, and as always happens, they bowed to Ghanshyam, as a recognition of his godhead, took his blessing, and drove the cart with the golden cannon on it towards the palace of the king, relieved and happy in their hearts that a difficult job was successfully accomplished.
In a fix. There was a garden at a short distance from Ghanshyam's house. It belonged to Dharmadev, and was looked after by Ram Pratap Bhai. Once Ghanshyam and Ram Pratap Bhai decided to grow a jack tree for its jackfruit. They thought that when the jackfruits ripened, they would pick them from the tree, bring them home and offer them to Bhakti Mata, who was fond of the jackfruit. Time passed, and one night 2 thieves came, and cutting a hole in the wall, entered the garden. Silently and stealthily they walked up to the jackfruit tree, which was now fully grown, and climbed it. They thought, "The fruits are all ripe, let us pick them." We shall carry them in our bags and earn a lot of money by selling them. But what is this? No sooner did they touch the first jackfruit in order to pluck it, that both their hands got stuck to the fruit. They tried very hard, but could not free their hands. While they were still struggling, day dawned, and soon it was morning. Dharmadev, carrying a water pot in hand, came to the garden for brushing his teeth. The two thieves saw him and quickly repented their wrongdoing. They prayed and decided in their minds, never again shall we commit a theft. Never again shall we take away anything without asking the owner's permission. O Lord, please set us free. If Rampratap Bhai comes, he will break our bones. Please, therefore, O Lord, we pray to you again. Set us free. Save us. Soon they saw, in the distance, Rampratap Bhai and Ghanshyam coming towards them. They were panic-stricken. When Rampratap Bhai saw the thieves on the tree, he wanted to beat them with a heavy stick, but Ghanshyam stopped him. He went near to the jackfruit tree along with his father. With tears in his eyes, the thieves begged for forgiveness. O Dharmadev, they said, we have committed a crime. We came to your garden to steal the jackfruits, but our hands got stuck to the fruits, so we cannot get down from the tree. Please set us free and forgive us our sin. We shall never again steal anything. Listening to their tearful plea, Ghanshyam just gave their hands a look. At once, their hands were freed. Both the thieves got down, bowed down to Dharmadev, Rampratap, and Ghanshyam, and once again fell on their knees and begged to be forgiven. Ghanshyam told them, do not steal any more. Stealing is a grave sin. So saying, he picked 2 ripe jackfruits and gave one to each of them. He then gave them his blessing
Chapter 43,
and asked them
seen
to
in
go
2
away.
forms. The Diwali festival was on. Dharmadev and Bhakti Mata began preparations for the food offering, or Ankut, ceremonies, even as early as the 13th day of the dark half of the month of Ashram, that is Dhanteras, the day of which the goddess of wealth is worshipped. It is the first day of the 4-day Diwali festival. People get many tasty foodstuffs ready for offering to Thakurji, the deity, in their home. Plates full of sweets like ladu, jalebi, mesur, mohanthad, sata, barfi, penda, etc. were prepared. A variety of savory and fried articles like sev, chevda, fafda, matia, chodafadi, etc. were also ready. On Diwali day, Bhakti Mata and Suvasini Babi, along with other women from the village, began their cooking from early in the morning. Bhakti Mata prepared dudhpak, shikhand, basundi, shira, biranj, and other such delicacies, while Suvasini Babi made savories like dokra, patra, bhajia, and kachori. Some ladies prepared a variety of vegetable dishes, while others cooked a number of pulses, or kator. Some fried puris, chaptis, roti, pakodi, kaja, etc., while some others boiled rice, dal, curry, khichdi. Rampratap, the eldest brother, went to get fruits like chiku, dadam, or pomegranates, fanas, jackfruits, grapes, sugarcane, bananas, oranges, and cashew nuts from the fruit garden. In Thakurji's room, Ghanshyam helped his father with the decorations. They dressed Thakurji in beautiful clothes. Garlands of leaves were hung up everywhere. Lamps were lighted. By this time, it was 11 in the night. Plates filled with a variety of foods were arranged in front of Thakurji. By 12, all the sweets, salty foodstuffs, pulses, vegetables, and fruits had been laid out. Betel leaves were also placed before the deity as an offering. Then, after sprinkling water from a silver pot, all sat down before Thakurji, and Arti began with the clanging of bells and the beating of drums. All the people of the village gathered at Dharmadev's house at the time of Arti to witness the food offering ceremony. Then a miracle happened. People's eyes began to turn this way and that way. Sometimes they looked in the direction of Dharmadev, and sometimes in the direction of Thakurji. They saw 2 Ghanshyams, one Ghanshyam by the side of Thakurji, and another by the side of Dharmadev, who was engaged in waving Arti, both at one and the same time. There was no mistake. They saw these twin forms of Ghanshyam till the ritual of Arti was over. They were astonished. Soon their astonishment turned to ecstasy. Everyone knew the meaning of what they saw. Thakurji and Ghanshyam were one and the same. They all prostrated themselves before the 2. Seeing the miracle, Dharmadev, who also understood that Ghanshyam was God Supreme, immediately sent for a big plate. He put on it all the varieties of food and sweets from all other plates which had been placed as an offering, and served it to Ghanshyam. Ghanshyam called his younger brother Icharam, and both brothers then began to eat in front of Thakurji himself. People remained to see the food offering till 2 o'clock in the morning. Then Ghanshyam with his own hands gave a little of the consecrated food, prasadi, from the food offering to each of the villagers. People returned home with the prasadi, full of joy at the thought that they had received it at the hands of God.
The priest
himself.
is made to see. Behind Dharmadev's house in Ayodhya, there was the Mahadev temple. Ghanshyam once went there to have Mahadev's darshan. When he was engaged in darshan, he heard a man by the name of Devi Bhaks praying to Lord Shankara and asking for something which was sinful to ask. Hearing this, Ghanshyam became exasperated. He felt like leaving home to practice penance. It occurred to him that there might be innumerable human beings like the man in the world who were ignorant and superstitious, and he must, therefore, go and give advice to them all, and do good to them. The thought filled him with distress. When he returned home, he was in a gloomy frame of mind. When Dharmadev saw that his son was depressed, he asked him, "Why do you look so depressed, my son?" Ghanshyam laughed the question away, saying, "No, father, I am not at all depressed." Next day, Ghanshyam went for darshan at the Vidyakund temple. A blind Brahmin named Braj Vihari was a priest of the temple. He had a whole of the Ramayana and Mahabharata by heart, so sitting there in the temple, he was telling the story of Ramayana. Many devotees were listening to the story with rapt attention. As Ghanshyam entered the temple, he heard the priest saying, "Ramchandra left home to suffer exile in a forest for a period of 14 years. This act of Ram's made a deep impression on Ghanshyam, and again the thought came to him, the thought of leaving home and going to a forest to do penance there. He requested Vraj Vihari, the blind Brahmin, to stop the story for a moment, because he wanted to ask a question about disillusionment and renunciation. The Brahmin replied angrily, "Do not interrupt my story. Come to my house, and I shall answer all your questions for you." Ghanshyam was disappointed with the reply. He quietly went and sat on the veranda outside. When the devotees saw this, they immediately advised the Brahmin with one voice, "You do not know what you have done. Ghanshyam is a man of miracles. He is God himself. Why did you refuse to answer his questions?" Vraj Vihari realized that he had committed a blunder. Led by one of his disciples, he came out on the veranda and fell at Ghanshyam's feet and asked for forgiveness. Humbly he said to Ghanshyam, "Oh Ghanshyam, I did not know it was you. You are God incarnate. You are a man of miracles. I am a blind man. Please give me my eyesight. I shall always worship God and spend all my time in reading the sacred Puranas. Help me purify my character. Give me your blessings and restore my eyesight." Ghanshyam felt pity for the Brahmin. He placed his hand on the Brahmin's head and gazed into his eyes. Lo and behold, the Brahmin began to see. His sight was restored. While his eyes were healing, the Brahmin and all the other devotees present there had a vision of Lord Ramchandra in Ghanshyam. When the Brahmin recovered from his stupendous experience, he fell at Ghanshyam's feet, and after receiving his blessings once more, he went home with
Chapter
joy
45.
and gratitude.
His daily routine. Ghanshyam would get up from his bed at 4 o'clock in the morning every day. After getting up, he would meditate on God for a few minutes. Thereafter, he would go for his daily bath in the Sadi river in the company of his friends. There he would clean his teeth. Then after a bath, he would put on his clean clothes and perform his worship, and practice meditation once again. After that, he would have a glass of milk, and then sit down to his studies with Dharmadev. The latter would teach him Sanskrit grammar, Dharmasastra, the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Gita, Sankhya, Yoga, Vedanta, and Nyaya Darshanas, etc. Ghanshyam would listen to his father's teaching attentively. When Dharmadev completed his part of the teaching, Ghanshyam would study the book all by himself. At 9, he would visit all the temples in Ayodhya and have darshan of the idols. Wherever the story of Ramayana was narrated, he would sit and listen to it with rapt attention. At 12, he would return home, wash his hands and feet, and have lunch with Dharmadev. Thereafter, he would resume his study. At 3 in the afternoon, he would again go for a bath in the river. Then, accompanied by his friends, he would without fail go to the temple at Hanuman Gadi for darshan during the evening arti. He would come back home only after evening arti was done. Returning home, he would again wash his hands and feet and have dinner with Dharmadev. Thereafter, he would go and sit by the side of his father, who would tell him stories from the Ramayana, Mahabharata, and Purans, etc. To all these he listened with great care and interest. Then, when it was time to sleep, he would go to bed. Such was his
establishment of Vishishtadvaita teachings in Kashi. Ghanshyam was now in his 10th year. At about this time, an eclipse of the moon was to occur. Dharmadev decided to go to Kashi with some relatives and bathe in the holy Ganges at the time of the eclipse. Dharmadev was a renowned scholar. When the scholars in Kashi found out that Dharmadev arrived in Kashi and was at the bank of Ganges by Gomat, they went to meet him. Ghanshyam was always there with Dharmadev. When they saw Ghanshyam, they wondered if Brahaspati himself had come in the form of a son to Dharmadev. The scholars of Kashi organized a debate on the scriptures in the Gomat. Dharmadev was to be the chairman, and the debate would be attended by scholars of all the different schools of philosophy and teachings. The Advaita scholars started the discussion saying, everything is Brahman. Brahman is the only reality. All else is illusion. The Dvaita scholars replied, no, Brahman, Jiva, and this world are all true. The debate continued for a long time. The scholars knew there would be no end to it, so they decided to ask Ghanshyam. A brilliant scholar like him would surely solve the issue. His word would be regarded as final and full of authority. Thus, because everyone desired so, Ghanshyam, with Dharmadev's permission, entered into the discussion. He beautifully and very clearly explained the deep and difficult meanings of the verses from the Vedas. With the backing of the scriptures, he solidly established that the Vishishtadvaita was the best school of teaching. Everyone was spellbound by his knowledge and oratory. As Ghanshyam continued to speak, rays of divine light burst forth from his body, and so everyone was in samadhi. Each scholar saw his favorite deity in Ghanshyam's form. Some saw Shankaracharya, others saw Sada Shiva or Ramchandra, and still others Sri Krishna. In the state of trance, everyone performed Ghanshyam's puja with sandalwood paste and vermilion. Dharmadev was greatly surprised on seeing all this. Finally, when Ghanshyam awoke everyone from samadhi, they all prostrated before him and prayed for his divine blessings. Respect for Dharmadev rose greatly in Kashi. Everybody congratulated him on having such a miraculous son. Ghanshyam had become famous, and Dharmadev's
Chapter
joy
47,
was
The Passing Away of Bhaktimata and Dharmadev. Ghanshyam was now 10 years of age. Bhaktimata and Dharmadev were quite old. One day, Bhaktimata went down with a fever. Day by day, she grew worse and worse. Because of the fever and the weakness, she had become bedridden. One evening, she called all her 3 sons and said to them, my disease is getting worse every day, and whole of my body is aching. I will not survive very long. Rampratap and Suvasini, you will please take care of Ghanshyam and Icharam. Ghanshyam and Icharam, you will always obey your elder brother and Babi, and all of you should live together in peace and love. Dharmadev and Rampratap Bhai wrote all their relatives asking them to come to Chapaya, since Bhaktimata's end was drawing near. Once Ghanshyam preached a sermon to his mother about God and man, and also appeared to her as an image of Narayan with 4 arms. Bhaktimata, her eyes closed, lost herself in meditation on that resplendent vision of Ghanshyam. After a while she quietly passed away and entered Akshardham. The 3 brothers and their father, along with their relatives and villagers, performed the funeral rites and resolved that they would be as religious and devout as she. 6 months later, Dharmadev also fell ill. Because of old age, he felt very weak and tired. He was so feeble that he could not even get up from his bed. From his place in bed, he began to distribute alms to the poor and gifts to the Brahmins. He asked one of his sons to read to him the stories of the Bhagavata. One day, when the reading was over, he called all 3 sons to him and said a few words specially to Rampratap. Listen, my dear Rampratap, you know now that Ghanshyam is God incarnate and is not attached in any way to this mundane existence, so please give him all your devotion, treat him with love and respect. Take good care of Icharam. You, Ghanshyam and Icharam, remember Rampratap Bhai is your elder brother, and you owe him obedience. After Dharmadev had spoken, a brilliant light emanated from the body of Ghanshyam. In that light, Dharmadev saw the 24 incarnations of God, Ram, Krishna, and others, and Brahm, Vishnu, and Mahesh. Lying in his bed, Dharmadev prayed with folded hands to Ghanshyam. A few minutes later, he took his last breath. All were grief-stricken. They bathed his body in the holy water of the Ganges and performed the funeral rites. Alms were given to the poor and to the Brahmins. All prayed to God that they might become as pure and religious as
Ghanshyam leaves home. After the death of Bhakti Mata and Dharmadev, Ghanshyam thought of leaving home and practicing penance in the forest. He was waiting for a suitable opportunity for leaving home. Meanwhile, one morning he felt very dejected in mind. After finishing his morning bath, he went round to all the temples in Ayodhya and had darshan. When he was returning from his visit, he passed a garden on his way in which some wrestlers were practicing their skills. Seeing Ghanshyam passing by, the wrestlers surrounded him from all sides and prevented him from proceeding on his way. Ghanshyam, by using his divine power, made his body as big and as strong as the wrestlers and plunged into combat with them. There were 27 of them. However, he lifted them one by one, turned them round and round, and finally threw them on the ground. It was a violent throw, and the wrestlers had all their bones smashed. No one could get up. Realizing their pitiable condition, all the 27 wrestlers began to cry like small children. The parents and relatives of the wrestlers went to Ghanshyam's elder brother to complain. They said to Ram Pratap Bhai, "Your Ghanshyam has set upon and beaten up our wrestlers' sons for no fault of theirs." When Ram Pratap Bhai heard this, he thought of rebuking Ghanshyam. If people started complaining about him daily, he thought it would be bad for them. Their reputation in the town would suffer. It would not be proper for Ghanshyam to indulge in merrymaking of this kind. Thinking so, Ram Pratap Bhai rebuked Ghanshyam severely. Ghanshyam heard his brother patiently and in the end said, "Respected brother, rest assured, there will be no complaint against me from today." It was then that Ghanshyam made his decision to leave home. After their evening meal, both his brother and Bobby went to sleep, with no inkling of what might happen the next day. Early in the morning the next day, Ghanshyam got up. The time was 3:30. Quietly, when everyone else was fast asleep, he took his belongings and walked out of the house. Whoever saw him thought he was going for his bath, since he was walking towards the river Sadhu. At the time, Ghanshyam had a waistband of moonj grass round his waist. On his body there was only one piece of cloth, the kaupian, lion cloth. On his back he had put on the mriga charma, the skin of a deer. He held a rosary in one hand and a stick, danda, of palash tree in the other. At the end of the stick he had tied a small bundle, gutka, of papers containing extracts, forming the essence of the scriptures. He also carried a water pot, kamandala, and alms bowl, Bhikshapatra, and a filter cloth with him. A double string of tulsi beads hung round his neck, and a sacred thread round his shoulders. He also took with him a shaligram, that is, an image of Vishnu, and the batwa of Balmukund, that is, an image of Sri Krishna. There was a tilak on his forehead. His hair was matted. He was walking barefoot. Clad and equipped in this ascetic manner, Ghanshyam proceeded to do penance in the Himalayas, a long way
on the banks of river Sadhu. Thus, clad as a Varni, sadhu or yogi, Ghanshyam, after leaving home, walked in the direction of Sadhu river. He looked back frequently over his shoulders, fearing that his elder brother might come and force him to go back home. But he was determined that he would never return home, but would practice severe penance and help people attain salvation. He walked briskly on, and soon reached the bank of Sadhu. It was the morning of the 10th of the bright half of the month of Ashad, in the year of 1849 of the Vikram era, i.e. 1793 A.D. There was a faint drizzle. The Sadhu was, however, in flood, and was overflowing both its banks. Ghanshyam, only 12 years old, thought it would be good if a boat was available. With that thought in mind, he sat on a stone on the river bank and hoping something would turn up. With this thought in mind, he sat on a stone on the river bank, hoping something would turn up. Meanwhile, Kalya, the leader of the Asurs, sent a demon named Kaushika with instructions to kill Ghanshyam. Kaushika, the demon, came from behind Ghanshyam, stealthily in the manner of a cat, and with one blow hurled little Ghanshyam into the flood waters of Saryu. Ghanshyam was carried away by the floods, and within a short time disappeared from sight. Goshika, the demon, pleased with his exploit, went to convey the good news to his
ocean of tears. At home, when Rampatabai and Suvasni Bhabi woke up, they found Ghanshyam was not in his bed. They thought, perhaps he has risen a little earlier than usual and has gone to take an early bath. Rampatabai went away to work in his field as usual. Bhabi prepared breakfast and then started cooking the midday meal. In the busy hours of the morning, they forgot about Ghanshyam for a while. But soon Bhabi began to worry. It is past noon already. Why hasn't Ghanshyam returned from his bath? For a long time she waited for Ghanshyam to return so they could all have a meal together. But there was no sign of Ghanshyam. Bhabi's anxiety increased. She called Ghanshyam's friend and asked them, "Where is Ghanshyam? Have you seen him? Why has he not come back still? Do you know where he has gone?" But his friends replied, "We don't know. He did not come with us. When we went to the river for a bath, he was not there." Bhabi became more anxious than ever. She went to the houses of all relations in search of Ghanshyam. She inquired at the house of Lakshmibai, Chandamasi and others, but no one knew where Ghanshyam was. It was evening by then. Bhabi sent a man to bring Rampatabai home. When he came home, she told him that Ghanshyam had not returned, and no one could say where he had gone. Rampatabai too was deeply worried. He went and looked around all the temples where Ghanshyam used to go for darshan, but Ghanshyam could not be found. He then searched in the bank of the river Saryu, in the garden of the rose apple trees, on the outskirts of the village, in the fields of Veni, Madhav and Prague. In fact, he searched all those places which Ghanshyam was in the habit of visiting, but nowhere could he find Ghanshyam. The younger brother, Icharam, would ask Bhabi, "Where has Ghanshyam gone? I cannot stay in this house without him. Please tell me where he is and bring him back." But Bhabi had no answer. She was grief-stricken beyond words and cried her heart out. Even the friends of Ghanshyam were in no mood to play without him. Everyone asked, "Where is Ghanshyam? Where is Ghanshyam?" But no one could answer. The people of the village came inquiring, "Did you find Ghanshyam?" We went around all the places and looked for him in the streets, in the village square, in the fields, everywhere, but he is not to be found anywhere. Where could he have gone? What could have happened to him? Why has he not come back? For Rampatabai it was unbearable. He was speechless with sorrow. His eyes were wet with silent tears. The relatives who were looking everywhere also gave up the search as hopeless. It was now almost dark. Night was approaching. Still there were a few who with lamps in their hands set out in search of Ghanshyam. However, bleak the chances of finding him. At home, there was no end to Bhabi's wailing. Icharam too was crying ceaselessly. The friends were in agony. Ghanshyam was the darling of all. There was lamentation in every home of Ayodhya. Bhabi was haunted by the imaginary fears about Ghanshyam's safety. What if, perchance, he was torn into pieces and devoured by a tiger or a wolf in the jungle, or bitten by a poisonous snake, or swallowed by a crocodile in the river? Such fearful thoughts would cross her worried mind, and she cried all the more. Finally rose a suspicion. Could he have left home for good, donned the sadhu's garb, and gone out into the forest to do penance, because he was rebuked by his elder brother yesterday? But his clothes and his sandals were still there. How would he walk barefoot? How would he keep off the rain? How would he bear the cold and the heat, bare-bodied as he must be? Who would feed him in the jungle? How would her Ghanshyam, who was used to eating curds, milk, and sweets every day, now like eating the wild fruits and leaves of the jungle? The wild animals might devour him. After going everywhere and searching all the places over and over again, Rampatabai, exhausted and disheartened, returned home at midnight. Ghanshyam could not be found. Rampratap's endurance was at breaking point. The agony was terrible. Both he and his wife cried out to God for help in their extremity. "O God, please find our Ghanshyam for us. Our hearts are broken. It is unbearable. O Lord, take us away if you like, but give us back our Ghanshyam, who is dearer to us than our own lives. People will accuse us, saying the brother and Bhabhi drove him out. They will say Ghanshyam has gone away because his elder brother and Bhabhi harassed him beyond endurance. No, O Lord, no. We cannot bear this torture any more. Be kind and merciful. Lord, give us our Ghanshyam back to us. We promise to do as he wishes. In this way they both continued to lament their fate. Night passed and morning came. Ram Pratap by this time sent men with horses in all directions in a last desperate search for Ghanshyam. Ram Pratap stopped doing his work in the field. No one took any food. No one liked to eat. Icharam kept crying the whole day, remembering his brother all the time. Thus days passed, 5 days, 10 days, but no news of Ghanshyam came. Everybody was utterly, hopelessly grief-stricken. As people said later, oceans of tears rolled by Icharam and Bhabhi, who were very often suddenly woken up from their sleep and bewildered and distraught, cried out, Ghanshyam, Ghanshyam. The whole city of Ayodhya was plunged into grief, unspeakable grief, and felt abandoned and desolate.